Callum,
Yeah.
why did Jaime Lannister get fired from the cereal factory?
Because he's a serial killer? I don't know.
He kept throwing Bran out the window.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I'm never going to get this. These fucking suck.
Oh my god. I think that's pretty funny. Anyway, hello and welcome to our recap and rankings for Game of Thrones Season 1. We're going to be going through everything that we've watched and all the characters and everything in a bunch of categories that you guys can vote in. And we're going to be ranking all the episodes, and it's going to be a whole bunch of fun, so stay tuned, everyone. In terms of Patreon, you can get access to our full-length reactions for episodes on there, as well as early access to videos like this one day early. And then we also have twitter.com/Giandrazzani for the socials, where we just have discussions, and it would be nice to have someone pop in and talk about Game of Thrones, because it's been all Doctor Who at the moment. That's fine, but it would be nice to have a bit of a Game of Thrones chat at some point. Though, having said that, bear in mind that Callum, we don't want to spoil him or anything, but it would be nice at some point for that to pop up, so go check that out if you like. But yes, those are the plugs. So, with all that said, Callum, let's begin this monster of a video that's probably going to take quite a while.
Yeah.
Because we got a lot to talk about. So, your initial overview of Game of Thrones Season 1.
It was great. It is probably one of the best first seasons of a television show I've seen. The only other things I can really think of that were better in terms of shows first season are probably Doctor Who and Heroes. Two shows I think had really good first seasons. This, though, was also very, very good. All 10 episodes were of very good quality, with great character arcs, very consistent storytelling, great direction, great music, fantastic acting, and very well set up for the future of the show. I think it was a fantastic first season, and a lot of highlights, and there's hardly anything I can really majorly criticise about it on like a massive scale. I have nitpicks, but while they're obviously nitpicks, I'm not going to use this term nitpick and say, oh, it doesn't matter, but it's like, the very minor criticisms I have don't really affect the quality of the first season as a whole majorly. Like, this first season was fantastic from start to finish.
Does Years and Years count as a first season?
I guess in a sense, yeah, it does, but that's a very different show, because it's just, I don't know what the term would be, because obviously there's...
Well, it's a serial. It's a serial.
Yeah, exactly, it's a serial. That would be the term.
Which is interesting, because there are other shows that do serials, like, for example, Torchwood Children of Earth is a serial, but that's season 3 of the show.
Yeah.
Except I think the difference is Years and Years is self-contained, and it's not going to continue, like, that's it. But I don't think that counts, because it's only one.
Yeah, I wouldn't say
and it's not one because it was cancelled, it was one because that was intended that way.
Yeah, it's just intended for a certain amount of episodes to tell its story. Yeah, I would say this first season was brilliant.
Yeah.
One of the best first seasons of a television show I've seen.
Yep, I absolutely agree. I love this. I think it's pretty bang, spot on, phenomenal from start to finish. Not only is it almost completely void of flaws, but it's also extremely complex. Because, for example, I once heard a very clever man state once that if you filmed a man like doing, like, paying his taxes, doing his debts, like on a desk for like an hour, it wouldn't have any flaws, because technically speaking, it would be, all correct, but it would be extremely boring to watch. Whereas with this, there isn't many flaws, but it goes big. It's huge. It's a massive, complicated story with hundreds of characters, hundreds of storylines, and they are all brilliant. All of them. They are executed to almost perfection in every instance. and they all interlink. They're thematically, they have themes that work as well on top of that. And then you factor in the acting, the direction, the music, the writing, just everything. It all flows together, and it is brilliant. It is so brilliant. I think this season, like, if we just take this season as like an isolated incident, I think this season is like one of the best examples of an adaptation to screen I've ever seen.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
As someone who obviously has never read the books, when it is an adaptation of something, it's hard to disagree that it's very good and therefore it's a good adaptation.
But one of the best things about it is the fact that some of our favourite moments from this season are things that are added on top of the source material.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, there are actually people that would argue that this season is actually better than the first book.
It's very tightly written, this first season.
Yeah.
And it's done expertly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think it's absolutely amazing, and we're gonna get into why. We're gonna get into all the different factors of why. So, we have a lot of characters to get through. You might be surprised how many there are. When I was writing them down, I forgot some of them, and I had to read through all the different reviews we've done and just see all the ones that I've written down. And there were so many that I forgot to write down at first, and oh my word, there's a lot. There's a lot of characters.
Oh yeah, I imagine there's a lot.
Yeah. So, let's not waste any time. Let's begin with Ned Stark.
Oh boy. Definitely, obviously, the protagonist of this first season, who goes on a big journey and then suffers the same fate of one character who you learn about at the start of the season, and goes on quite an interesting journey. Definitely one of the best characters in this season. Probably the best actor of this season. Probably tied with Peter Dinklage, probably, because they're both incredible actors. But Sean Bean did a bloody fantastic job when doing this whole season. I think he was brilliant throughout.
Yeah, Ned
I love his arc, because obviously it's very established that Starks are very honourable. They always try to do honourable thing, and throughout this entire season he does that. But when he needs to not do that, at the very end of his story, he is then killed anyway. I think it's done so well and is great storytelling. Just fantastic stuff for Ned's character, and the ripple effect of his death will affect the entire show going forward. If I was to make a prediction as a viewer, just brilliant stuff.
Yeah,
definitely one of the best characters of the show.
Yeah, he was our main
first season.
He was our main point of view character for the main storyline of the death of Jon Arryn, the mystery of Joffrey Baratheon's parents, and all of that. He was our main point of view character for that whole story, and he suffered the same fate that Jon Arryn did. And he did so.
Really asked too many questions.
He did so, breaking his honor to benefit the livelihood of his children, with the entire of King's Landing calling him a traitor and committing treason, and being killed anyway because of Joffrey. I think, this whole story for Ned is, I honestly think Ned's story in this is perfect. I can't think of one thing that's wrong about any scene with Ned in it. In regards to his character, his story is flawless. It is so compelling. The acting is off the charts from Sean Bean. The character is so complex. The fact that he at first, what it seems, plays the most respectable character in the world, but then it's revealed that the flaw that he has within him is the fact that he's too good. He's too honourable. He follows the rules too closely, and that ends up damaging people around him, because he wants to live in a world of black and white and good and evil, but it can't work like that. And him trying too hard to follow the path to good, the path to honour, is actually not going to benefit some people. In fact, at one point in the very climax of his life, him following honor would damage his children. And it's so brilliant the way that the story and George R. R. Martin subvert the hero with Ned Stark, where they tell a story where someone who's being the most heroic is the one that suffers the worst consequences.
Yeah.
It is, and I think that works so well for a first season and a first book, because at that point you are conditioned to the traditions of storytelling from, Shakespearean to the Brothers Grimm and all sorts like that. If you've seen cinema, like all those things like Star Wars and Jaws, E.T., or like all those films that you know about, Rocky, Terminator, all that sort of thing. If you read any books too. And yeah, the way that George R. R. Martin uses this character to subvert the hero's journey, I think is brilliant. It's genius. And then, of course, adapted into a TV show, casting Sean Bean, the perfect person to cast for this role, played it to perfection. His fear, his anxiety, his PTSD, but then also his fatherly moments, his warm fatherly moments, his fierceness, his coldness, and like his bluntness with words. There's chemistry with other characters too, like Robert Baratheon, for example, the brotherly chemistry they have. It's just everything with Ned is great, all of it.
I agree. I think his interactions with all the characters as well, every single one he interacts with, I think is great. From Cersei, Jaime, all of his son and daughters.
His wife too, Catelyn.
Baratheon, Catelyn, Robert. All of it is fantastic. And the chemistry he has with a lot of the actors as well is brilliant as well. Does such a great job with everybody around him to develop the story around him. I think it's just brilliant. They couldn't go wrong with Sean Bean playing this character because he suits it so well. Oh yeah,
well I mean, when George R. R. Martin wrote the character, when he first wrote the book, Sean Bean was what he had in mind. And this was back when Sean Bean was much younger, like when he was filming Lord of the Rings. So Ned Stark is actually meant to be a bit of a younger character than he ends up being. But they cast Sean Bean anyway, because why not?
Yeah, because he's fantastic.
Yeah, he is truly special. But yeah, I think Ned is great. He's so good. And like you said, his death is going to have a massive domino effect on the rest of the world.
Yeah, it will, for sure.
Because he was such a loved and respected man in the North, but then became so hated in King's Landing.
Yeah. Just good stuff.
Yeah.
Just brilliant stuff.
Absolutely brilliant. And the second character we're going to talk about, one that was very close to Ned for all of it, was obviously King Robert Baratheon, played by Mark Addy.
What a just lovable, fat, drunk fool who was also one of the most well-developed characters in the season in just about 7 episodes. Because at the start he goes from being a bumbling, just drunk king who just fucks whores in front of his wife to actually being quite a very sympathetic character.
Yeah, I think it was The Wolf and the Lion.
Amazingly acted by Mark Addy.
The Wolf and the Lion was his episode.
100%.
Yeah.
That scene with him and Cersei was one of the best scenes in the whole season.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. Because it does so much for his character to give him that sense of empathy and sympathy for him. Because at that point, you get little hints of it, I think like more so in the first episode, when they talked about Rob's sister.
You mean Ned's sister?
No, yeah, Ned's sister, sorry. We get hints of that, and then that gets developed on later on. It's so well done, and it can't be stressed enough how well acted Mark Addy was to get that across, because that's so important for his character to be able to connect with him, to have that sort of understanding of him as a person, so that you understand why he's such a drunk king, really, which is part of his downfall.
Yeah,
It's so well done
Yeah.
and put together.
We were talking before about how Ned Stark, it subverts the idea of a hero. With this, it subverts the idea of a monarchy. In the fact that, despite the fact that he's the most powerful man in the world, he's the king. I think the line that sums it up for his character is when he says to Cersei, "Not even the Seven Kingdoms could fill the hole she left behind."
Yeah. His story is that he is a broken down man and dies a broken down man. And it's brilliantly done because the performance and just most of the dialogue he has is brilliant.
Oh yeah, he's one of the funniest characters as well.
He's one of the funniest characters, but one of the most depressing characters. I would say he's probably the most depressing character in the whole season because it's almost like he hides behind his comedy and he hides behind drinking and eating and fucking because he is a broken down man because of the whole his love left when she died. And it's sad. It is a sad story because he basically dies broken.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very heartbreaking in the sense that he thought that being king would fix his life, but it just made it worse.
It made it way worse. He is a terrible king because of his depressing life. Yeah.
Yes, that's part of the reason why Ned's honor was flawed in the sense that he was pledging honor to the king who was a bad king, but he did it anyway because honoring your king is the law, not only the law but it's culture.
Yeah. The only thing throughout the season was like a light for him was his friendship with Ned, which even then that turned sour due to the differences of opinion they had on wanting to kill Daenerys because of a unborn son. That broke apart and was brilliantly done because the chemistry between Mark Addy and Sean Bean was incredible.
Absolutely.
It was the most lovable relationship of friendship, yet it was still very dark as well. It still was very broken, a very broken friendship because of how much they drifted off.
Yeah, you obviously get that moment right on his deathbed when he regrets sending the death threat to Daenerys.
Yeah. Yeah, a nice book end for his character by having that regret because he knows he'd done a terrible thing to do, killing a woman just because of an unborn child, due to fear. But Robert Baratheon White, he was a very funny character, a very silly character.
Yeah,
he was one of the most sympathetic characters.
Yeah, but oh word, the funny moments were great, weren't they?
Yeah, they were hilarious.
You got fat. Thank the gods for Bessie and her tits.
Yeah, it's really good stuff.
Your mother was a dumb whore with a fat ass. Did you know that?
Good. It's just what a great character.
Give me the breastplate stretcher. Too fat for my armor. So good. Yeah. Brilliantly hilarious, but also heartbreakingly broken and brilliantly performed. Mark Addy, man. Oh, what a great actor. What a brilliant actor.
Yeah.
I don't think he quite gets enough credit, honestly. I don't think he quite gets enough credit for his acting.
Yeah. I definitely think because I would probably imagine he doesn't get enough credit. But yeah, great casting and a great actor playing a very dark man. Very well done. I enjoy his downward spiral.
Downward spiral, yeah.
Depression.
Yeah. The one time though that he does actually make a good king is on a small scale, and we saw that in the King's Road. Because he knows how to sort out children. Like it's very like the very simple things like, look, children fight. You know, you discipline your daughter, I'll discipline my son, and we'll move on. Like he's actually quite good with that. But the problem is that he can't run 7 kingdoms.
Yeah.
Because Robert Baratheon is not a king in reality. He's a soldier with an axe. Not an axe, maybe a hammer. But yeah. He's a very straight thinking, simple man that likes to deal with things with force. And that doesn't make a good politician or a good king. But because he won the war and Ned refused the throne, Robert took the throne, so it was his by right. But it just goes to show, like, George R. R. Martin showing the flaw of a monarchy and the benefit of a democracy, I feel. I'm not saying he's necessarily trying to do this all for a political statement, but it does... This character, Robert Baratheon, does expose some flaws in a monarchy.
Yeah.
And not just a monarchy of, like, line of succession, but a monarchy in the fact that if you win by war, you become the leader, if that makes sense. That's also a flaw in monarchy as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, Robert Baratheon was amazing. I am not 100% sure on this, but I think Adam said once that Robert was his favourite character, and I can see why.
Yeah, I can see why, because he's quite a... There's a lot to dig out from his character.
Yeah.
So it's very,
I mean,
very
Adam
complex
Adam loves, like, first, like, the two things that Adam loves, firstly, captivating, and secondly, broken.
Yeah, he does.
And Robert has that in spades.
Oh, yeah, he absolutely does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving on to our third character, we have Catelyn Stark.
Yeah, she was a very, very good, very solid character. Very, very, very well acted throughout, and then the last 2 episodes of the season are where she really shines, I would say.
I'd say the first 2 and the last 2 are her best.
Yeah. Like, I think the actress's performance is incredible. And it's like her character, like, changes a lot from the start to the end, mainly because of Ned. What he does and what happens to him very much changes her perspective as a character, because she goes from, like, quite a innocent wife to now turning to someone who wants all the Lannisters dead.
Yes.
And will probably stop at nothing to make sure that they die. It's a very, very, very big change for a character, and I am looking forward to seeing what she does next season. Yeah, in terms of just acting and as a character, very well built up and very solid. And I enjoy all her interactions with every character she has.
Yeah, and like you said, like, at the beginning, there is an innocence. However, I feel that even from the beginning, there is strength in her, in the sense that she was telling Ned, do not go south. You need to stay in the north where the people need you. You know, it might be dangerous down there. She's trying to protect her family, but she can't, because obviously Ned decides to go anyway.
Yeah.
And I love the way that Catelyn straddles, and it makes sense due to the combining of families, but I like the way that Catelyn straddles this, like, sort of conflict between being a Stark and being a Tully, in the sense that when she's around Ned, she feels like an outsider, in the sense that she's becoming, you know, less northern than the others, in the sense that Ned is all honor, all pride, all courage, you know, all good. And she's trying to put into perspective the dangers of what he's doing, and the fact that he doesn't have to say yes. She's trying to tell him that, you know, you don't have to follow your honor all the time. You can say no.
Yeah.
But then you get the opposite when she goes south to the Eirich and also to King's Landing, where she falls for Littlefinger, and not in terms of love, but she falls for his bluff. If you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, too much. She has too much faith in people that she used to trust.
Yeah, she has,
and that is the downfall of the Starks.
Yeah, that is the flaw in her becoming a Northerner, is the sense that she learns to trust people and she learns to honor, you know, those who she grew up with, like Littlefinger and Walder Frey. We saw at the end.
Yeah, it's like she doesn't see that people can change to the extreme.
But then obviously
many years.
Then obviously when she meets her sister again and she meets Walder Frey again, she notices that they have changed quite a lot.
Yeah, on a very massively, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's almost like taken aback by it in the episodes interacting with them.
Yeah. I also think one of the most unique details with Catelyn is the way she interacts with Jon Snow as well. In the sense that Catelyn has such a strong bond with all of her family members, but she disdains him.
Yeah, for a good reason, really, because he is Ned's bastard son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those, even though there was very little between them, the scenes they did have were brilliant because of that disdain between the two, and both actors pull it off amazingly well.
Mm-hmm.
And I very much enjoyed that as a concept.
Yeah.
This season.
Yeah. But yeah, I just and also the other thing as well, like Catelyn's chemistry with Robb Stark too. You can definitely tell they are family. They feel like it, you know. Unlike, you know, unlike the Chibnall TARDIS team who constantly have to tell you that they're family. With this,
that's what we are.
With this,
family.
With this, the Starks, right? They don't have to say it; they just are. They feel like family. You can believe it.
Yeah, it's very much a strong bond between the Starks.
Yeah, and they've all been splintered off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Catelyn's a great character, and
agree.
Brilliant to straddle all the conflict. And she is easily fooled, unfortunately, which leads to many horrible things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought Michelle Fairley was great in her role as well. You know, she plays Hermione's mum in Deathly Hallows Part 1. You know, the one that gets obliviated. I think she plays that.
Yeah, it's very brief, so it's hard to recognise that. But yeah, that would have came out a year before this, wouldn't it? Because that was 2010.
Yeah.
Part 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have another mother character, and that is Cersei Lannister.
Oddly, one of the most complex characters in the season.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was not expecting to sort of in some aspects sympathize with her, but then also I expected to also be quite hateful of her, because I think the first 2 episodes she has quite a lot of sympathy with her, because she talks a lot about her unborn child with Catelyn, which gives her a sense of you can understand her. Mm-hmm. So she has morals, but as the season goes on, when she unveils more of who she is as a person, she becomes more hateful because
you get
all the stuff with Joffrey and Jaime.
Yeah, obviously you get the incest with Jaime, and you also have the Joffrey. The Joffrey scene in episode 3 really sets up the hateful side of her. But it remains consistent because her defining character trait is that she loves her children. The same way that Catelyn loves hers. But the difference is the way they act on it.
They have a link there, but it's their morals that are so different.
Yeah.
In the way they see the world, really.
Yeah. Like, she's going to spoil Joffrey. And that starts to make him a toxic character, which then leads to Joffrey making the decision to have Ned's head cut, which Cersei didn't anticipate at all. Because this whole season...
nor did she want it.
Because this whole season, Joffrey's been, taking her orders. Or at least, he's been having discussions with her, but she feels that she's in control of her son. And if her son's the king, she feels like she can order him to do what she wants. But then, of course, in episode 9, that all changes when Joffrey decides to disregard the wailing of women, as he says. And yeah. But I agree. Cersei's a very complex character. Very complex. There's a lot of sympathy, but there's also a lot to hate as well. And I think her scenes with Ned and Robert are amazing.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a lot of disdain between the two, but then that one scene between them in The Wolf and the Lion was brilliant, because it not like with Robert, it gives that establishment of like depression with him, why he's such a broken person. With the same with Cersei, it's like she didn't like. It's just the complication of their relationship between the two is so interesting, and that scene was brilliant, not only for Robert's character but for Cersei's.
Yeah, and also the scene in You Win or You Die, the iconic scene actually, when she says when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There's no middle ground. But that whole scene with Ned, when Ned confesses to her that he knows the truth about Joffrey, that was a great scene. And then to then come back to the end of the episode where she rips up the king's paper.
Yeah. Yeah, her character went through a lot this season, and she's a very mysterious and complicated character for sure.
And also, we also learned in the final episode, I believe, that now that Jaime's captured, she's sleeping with her cousin.
Yeah.
So she's very fucked up.
Yeah. Like, I would say she's the most fucked up character right now. And Jaime's quite fucked up, but there's a sense of like, it's not established right. It's just slowly established, like especially with that scene with Jaime and Caitlin in the last episode of the season, where she walks away and then, like the facial expression has changed with Jaime. So there's a sense of like difference with him. With Cersei, it's very much she is not sane as a person.
And also in terms of Robert's death, it's all seeded throughout the season, but not quite. The pieces don't quite assemble until they click. But by the end, you can pretty much figure out that she was the one that ordered Lancel to poison him.
Yeah.
Because you can see it, you can see from all the disdain she has for him, and there's that scene, obviously, in Wolf and the Lion, where she finally gets it all off her chest, and she's done, and then there's the bit at the start of A Golden Crown where Robert slaps her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, and there's also the tease from Pycelle about the Tears of Lys, talking about that beforehand, and it's basically clear that Cersei was the one, must have been the one. I mean, you could, I suppose, make theories otherwise, but pretty much you can piece together the fact that Cersei must have been the one to order the Tears of Lys into Robert's drink.
Yeah.
And it would make sense because she would have plotted to have him killed so that Joffrey would get on the throne. It just makes sense.
Yeah. She is very much the mastermind throughout the entire season. And she's just a very interesting and complex character, and I am looking forward to see how both her and Joffrey develop going forward, especially with Tyrion coming to King's Landing as the Hand of the King.
And also,
that is a very big prospect I'm looking forward to.
And also, in terms of Jon Arryn's death, Ned actually never got to the final answer because he was killed. So you have to think to yourself, well, if Cersei was the one that had the Tears of Lys put in Robert's wine and Robert was killed from it, does that mean that she was also the one that killed Jon Arryn as well for investigating Joffrey's lineage? You got to ask yourself that question.
At this point in time, you would have to assume so, but obviously, I'm assuming the show will explore that further. So. There could be more than more than just that. One
thing I can say though is that in very subtle subtext, it has actually been revealed who it is. But you have to know, like you have to know who it is, and then rewatch it, and then you'll know. But like if you don't know, you don't know. I can say that. Very clever. But yeah, I think Cersei is a fantastic character. And I love how subtle Lena Headey's acting is. Like, all the detail she puts into it is very...
Yeah, she's one of the best, like, subtle characters in terms of acting. Because it's brilliant acting. But it's the best kind of held back in terms of a character, like, narrative. It's brilliant. It's so subtle
Yeah.
in the way she
And
acts, but it's so powerful.
And if we're going to go down the conversation about strong female characters, I think Catelyn and Cersei are prime examples of this.
Yes, because they're still like quite vulnerable characters, but they're still strong at the same time.
Well, they're written like real people, as opposed to someone like Captain Marvel, who's admittedly not a real person. It's a superhero, but in terms of the way the character's written,
in terms of the narrative, they're not the most extreme vulnerable woman, or the complete opposite, where they're the most powerful,
like Rey,
realistic,
like Rey from Star Wars.
Yeah, those are the two prime examples of where you take a female character, and just take it out of proportion to the highest degree on either side. This is how you write well done female characters. You just write them well, give them character arcs, and give them a narrative, and write it well, and make sure it's well established within the world.
Yeah, and
it's great
and
stuff.
George R. R. Martin was doing this in 1996.
Yeah, it's almost as if women have always had good female characters, but people forget those for the narrative that they put up with.
Well, yeah, because people only choose to remember the ones where they're bad. Like when they only choose to remember the female characters that weren't written well.
Yeah, or were highly sexualized, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
There have always been good female characters.
Oh my god,
you just
even
want this narrative.
Even the female characters that were sexualized in this season were great.
Yeah, because they're actually they're more complex than just, for example, like the whore who was mainly in Winterfell and then went to King's Landing. She goes on like a sort of like mini arc for herself, where she goes from Winterfell and then goes to like in the world, like the higher ups in like King's Landing.
Yeah,
you know, it's quite like a nice. That's a nice little storytelling. I don't know what the word would be. It's a good use of storytelling, having a character sort of travel in the background, like a minor character, through this as the story progresses.
Yes, because despite the fact that she's a prostitute, that's actually not what defines her character.
Like, she has knowledge of like the Starks through Greyjoy, and then she goes to King's Landing and is involved with Littlefinger. You know, I think that's so great to have a character that had that sort of link and be quite knowledgeable in their own right.
Absolutely.
It's very clever in the way it's written for those like sort of minor characters.
Yeah, and also the way that she links with not only Tyrion, but also Jon as well. Because the fact that Jon was once going to lose his virginity to her, and then there's you get that bit where Sam was like, "Oh, I like red hair." But yeah, I like the way that links to Jon's bastard storyline too.
Exactly. Like, they make minor characters be involved in the major characters' storylines to make the world feel more lived in and make all the characters seem more real.
Absolutely. Shall we move on to another interesting character?
Yep.
We have Jaime Lannister.
Jaime Lannister is like, as of right now, is a very, very solid, established character with a heck of a lot of potential going forward. Because out of all the Lannisters and Starks, I would say he wasn't underdeveloped at all. But he's definitely the one that I want the most build up next season. He's a very interesting character, a very complicated character like all the other Lannisters and Starks.
Except for Kevin.
Yeah, that's quite true. Because I loved this season. One of my favourite things about him was his sort of need to wanting to beat Ned in a sword fight, because he is known to be the best swordsman in Westeros.
Yeah, you get that scene at the first episode where he's saying to Ned, the competition's getting a bit stale. Yeah.
And then you get to the Wolf and the Lion where they fight, and then Ned is brought down by just a random guard, and that actually annoys Jaime.
But also,
I thought that was brilliantly done.
Yeah, but also another detail of that as well is the fact that it's not just a fight for the sake of having one. Is actually a reason why it happens. It's because Ned prevents his wife from danger by saying that he was the one that ordered Tyrion's capture, even though he wasn't. He did it on purpose to protect his wife from harm.
Yeah, he put all the blame on himself, so that Ned would be like, okay, all right, I'm gonna take you in then.
Yeah, and you got to imagine that he did that with confidence because he knew that despite the fact that Jaime was known as the best swordsman in the world, that Ned knew he still had it in him. And he absolutely did, because they were matched. They were matched for that whole fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I just love the way that Nikolai Coster-Waldau manages to portray such range with one character, in the sense that the first time you see him, you get that he's a Prince Charming type character. You know, he's very.
He has the look of Prince Charming and the sort of persona of Prince Charming.
Like, he's very arrogant, very cocky, and very brash, and very rude. But also, then you find out that he's got a great relationship with Tyrion. He's a very likable brother with Tyrion, and that hilarious scene in episode 1 where Cersei says that they have to go to dinner early, so he brings in the whores to get it. he's like, oh, I found a way to speed this up. He brings all the whores in, and Tyrion's got 4 at once. That's so funny. But yeah, no, Jaime's a very complex character, not only just for the fact that he's introduced as a Prince Charming type, the fact that he's part of the Kingsguard, the fact that he's the King's Slayer, so he killed the Mad King. He stabbed his king in the back, which makes Ned resent him. Despite the fact that the Mad King was burning Ned's father and brother, he resented Jaime for that because he killed his own king, despite the fact that he was in the King's Guard.
Yeah.
And you got to ask the question of, well, if he killed his king whilst in the King's Guard, then why is he still in the King's Guard? And you got to imagine it's because Robert is being controlled by the Lannisters. And they're essentially telling him that you need to allow our family to be in power. On top of all that, you got the fact that Jaime has an incestuous relationship with Cersei. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that, like, there's the part where he gets captured by Robb and Catelyn, and he has that conversation with Catelyn at the end, too. And I love the scenes where he's putting on this persona of, I don't care about anyone or anything. But then when everyone else leaves the room, you can see just the despair in his eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's very much putting on a facade to the nth degree in a great way.
Mm.
When he's alone, he becomes more vulnerable and becomes more emotional as a character.
Yeah,
I think it's really great, and I honestly look forward to seeing more of him next season, because I want him to be quite well developed next season, because I feel like he needs to, because he's definitely, while he's a very good character, definitely didn't get as much development as like all the other Starks and Lannisters.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still very good.
Yeah.
And very good setup as well for him.
Yeah, Jaime's definitely one of my favourites. I love him. He's great. Yeah. And also, I think I mentioned in the last review in Fire and Blood about how Nikolai Coster-Waldau is Danish and English is a second language, so he's having to put on an accent for this role, and he's doing it so well.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Jaime is so fascinating. He's very fascinating. You're always trying to dig like what's going on with him, and then every scene he's in, he reveals something new about himself.
Yeah.
But it's not a mess either. It's not like, they're just adding and piling random shit to make him unpredictable. Like, his
story is very well paced.
It all fits,
If it's the story that it's establishing in.
Yeah. And there's also the one massive thing I forgot to mention that we actually mentioned in the joke. He pushed Bran out the window. The things I do for love.
Yeah. Which is like that sets everything in motion. That moment sets everything in motion, along with the letter about Jon Arryn's death being sort of maybe arranged.
Yeah.
In the first episode.
Yeah, so
those two things set
even though Jaime
emotion.
Even though Jaime maybe didn't get quite as much screen time as some characters, he was actually quite important overall.
Yeah, he was one of the most important characters in terms of the plot's narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yep.
Okay, now we've got Tyrion Lannister.
Probably the best character of the season. For me, at least. Like, he's brilliant because of how... He's a Lannister, but he's the most unique Lannister because he is vulnerable yet powerful, which I think is brilliantly done throughout the entire season. How he's the smartest yet is in the most danger, I think, throughout the entire season.
Oh yeah, yeah, because he's the smartest man in the world. It's very clear.
Yeah,
he's very. Although to be fair, the one thing he lacks in terms of intelligence is belief in the magic. He denies the existence of the White Walkers. So he's very low when it comes to magic and religion, but when it comes to logical intelligence and like science and nature and people, he's the best. But like you said, because he's a dwarf, he's physically vulnerable all the time.
Yeah.
But then he's also powerful too. The fact that he's allowed to slap Joffrey and get away with it, not have his hands cut off. But then, of course, one of the defining moments for him, I think, is when he tells the story about Tysha. Because that really shows, his backstory, and it rather than just telling us how his father and brother feel about him and his sister, it actually explains one of the reasons why he has such a rocky relationship with his father. And the sort of the tight bond that he has with his brother that's linked to past events that affected him badly. The fact that he's now reliant on whores because he was married to one that he fell in love with at the age of 16 that was acting, and it tore him apart. And then also, just such a good character. And I love the whole thing of, because of Littlefinger, Catelyn captured Tyrion and almost sentenced him to death. And then there's this conflict between them, and Tyrion realizes that he's not going to get out of the claws of Lysa Arryn, so he decides to do a trial by combat. And what that means is that, but whilst Tyrion escaped because of the trial by combat, there is still heat between the Starks and the Lannisters, because him winning a trial by combat doesn't prove that he didn't do it. So the Starks will still hate him anyway.
Yeah, they still think he's involved in some capacity. Yeah, because it's a very fishy situation, and the way it was all sort of done still plants that doubt.
But I think one of the reasons why Tyrion makes for such a relatable character, though, is the fact that this show and this world is such a dangerous place. And I feel like the reason why we can relate to him is because he has such a talent for escaping death.
He does. Because this season he's put in like some of the most dangerous positions.
Yeah, like when firstly when the tribes went to hunt like him and Catelyn when they were going to the Eirich, and he was about to escape on a horse, but then obviously he killed the tribesmen with his shield and saved Catelyn's life, which was a really nice detail, I thought. Then, of course, you got the fact that he escaped death at the Eirich by doing a trial by combat. And I loved how brilliant that scene is when he says, "I confess my crimes. When I was a child, I once tore a woman's clothes off. I could still see her tits bouncing." He's so funny. And that's, again, another thing about Tyrion. He's one of the funniest characters, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, I love the scene where he's at the breakfast table with Jaime, Cersei, and Tommen and Marcella. When he's, they're, I think Cersei or Jaime asks him, like, "Oh, are you going to join the Night's Watch, are you?" And then he says, "No, the whores will miss me." But yeah, like what I was saying before, he has a way of escaping death, and so not only you get that bit, and then you also get the Eirich, and then afterwards escaping the Hill tribesmen in the Reach, and then obviously being put into a war and then getting knocked out and being carried to the end. I just think it's so charming the way he manages to just avoid death at all costs.
Yeah, you managed to avoid any sort of immediate threats.
Yeah. Like, it's funny because, like, a story that's known for characters constantly dying all the time, it's like, how has this imp not died yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, like Peter Dinklage, perfect casting. I thought he was excellent, and like Ned, in every scene he was in, he was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, Peter Dinklage is probably the best actor in the season for me, because he's incredible in terms of his like comedic elements, but also his character building as well, the world building around him, and how he's such a unique character in a unique position.
Yeah.
Makes him that much more interesting.
Yeah.
And I cannot wait. My probably like most anticipated thing for next season, it will be Tyrion being handed the king.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm really interested to see how that goes with Joffrey and Cersei and possibly Jaime.
Well, I mean, yeah, you'll have to wait and see with Jaime, because obviously he's been captured in the north.
Yeah,
And also the other thing is the relationship between Tyrion and his father is very interesting.
Yeah, the scenes they have together are very, very unique, and I like, because the way they establish it that like because he's an imp, his father looks down upon him, but then the scenes he has with him are like he realizes that Tyrion is a very smart person.
Yeah.
So and that's why he puts him at the hang.
Yeah,
of the king,
and
Tywin makes stupid. Yeah.
Tywin makes the tactical choice to have his imp son as Hand of the King because he knows he's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tyrion's so good. He's fantastic. And also, he gets to meet a few people that he sort of befriends, like Bronn and Shay as well. And I love the chemistry that Tyrion and Bronn have together. The fact that Bronn's biggest motivation is money, and Tyrion has money, but they also are kind of friends as well. And I love like the banter they have.
Yeah.
And then of course he meets Shay as well, who is that whore that he meets and is going to take her to King's Landing against his father's will.
Yeah.
But you can tell that because of the story he told about Taisha, he's almost falling down the same hole again.
Yeah. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say something else about Tyrion, but I forgot what I was going to say. Shit. I can't remember. But yeah, I love his interactions with all the different characters. Like, he's one of the people that had the most interactions with characters, because obviously he started in Winterfell, then went up to the Wall, then back down to Winterfell again, and then went through the Riverlands to the Eirich, and then around to where Tywin Lannister's camp was. So he had quite a lot of interactions.
He did.
Yeah. But yeah, I love Tyrion. Great character. He's a fan favorite for a reason.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. And an inspiration to all little people around the world, I think. Like, he is one of the most beloved actors in the world, regardless of his size. He's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So I think it really shows that despite any disabilities anyone may have, you can achieve greatness.
Yeah.
And now we move on to... So we've just talked about possibly the most lovable character. And now we move on to what's possibly the most hateable character. And that's Joffrey Baratheon. And I mean that in a good way. Hateable in a great way.
Yeah, because he is the most horrible, disgusting, evil character in the show. Because everything he does is the worst thing he could do to everybody around him, just because how selfish and self-centered he is. As now king he is, he just wants to rule over people because he feels he wants to overpower people, because he feels like it's his right. And everything he does is awful.
Yeah.
Killing Ned just because he doesn't like him and because he just didn't believe he was rightful king.
I think episode 2 is a great setup for him.
Yeah, him being involved in the entire thing with the children is very well done. It
his one
spiral.
his one decision to cause trouble made a massive ripple effect, and like him being an asshole to Micah caused Lady to die. Yeah. And just that scene where Ned has to kill Lady is so heartbreaking to watch. Like the way he just pats the dog around the ear and you hear the dog like whistle a little bit, and it's just, it's pain, and then he stabs it, and then the dog noise. You made a comment about how horrible it is to hear dogs dying.
Yeah, that was rough.
And then, of course, that escalates when Joffrey takes Robert's place on the throne.
Yeah.
And not only does he have Ned killed, but then the very next episode, he is a massive cunt to Sansa.
Yeah, just instantly just tells him to look at his father.
The lady he's meant to marry, he's being this horrible to. You know? You look lovely today. Despicable. Absolutely despicable Joffrey is. But I thought that Jack Gleeson, I can't remember exactly how old he is, but I'm pretty sure he was under the age of adult. And if that counts, I think he's one of the best child actors I've ever seen.
Yeah, he certainly is very, very good at what he does.
Yeah, he was incredibly nuanced. He was so powerful and just, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant actor he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the way he carries himself, and like the flamboyance and the cockiness, and just the way he sits on the throne, and all of his, like all the little things that Gleeson brings to the character that aren't on the script. It just adds on top of the just selfish arrogance Joffrey has.
Yeah, it's very well done.
Yeah.
In building up this. He is essentially the villain right now, I would say, because he is the most despicable character in the show because of his actions and what he sees himself as.
Yeah, and also another detail of the fact of like how cowardly he is when he gets bitten by the direwolf.
Yeah, like even like when Arya holds her sword towards him, he is the biggest pussy in the show because he's a coward.
And also when
under real threat, he's a coward.
And when Tyrion slaps him, and he's like, "I'm telling mother."
And they get slapped again.
Yeah.
Because, for example, Tyrion, he doesn't buy into like his like fear. Like he sees through that charade practically, and it's like he knows who really he is. He's a coward. An evil coward, but a coward nonetheless.
Yes. And also some of the most painful scenes, but in the best way, were the ones where Joffrey was putting on the prince facade for Sansa.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, like episode 2 is...
and episode, I think it might be a Golden Crown as well. The one where he gives her the necklace.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, and then instantly, like, he drops the whole facade when he's king.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, he doesn't care anymore because he knows that Sansa is in the palm of his hands. In terms of, like, she is practically like, trapped in King's Landing.
Oh, she's imprisoned, basically.
Yeah.
Under the grasp of Cersei and Joffrey. But yeah, Joffrey is an amazing character, I think.
I agree.
The fact that Ned Stark was taken down by a child. Again, exposing the flaw of a monarchy. Just so good. Alright, shall we move on?
Yep.
Alright, let's move on to the bastard himself, Jon Snow.
I enjoyed his story a lot. I enjoyed the way they established the wall aspect of the story of the season. Because it's definitely, I would say, it's not the weakest aspect, because I don't think there is any real weak aspect, but at first it's not as built up as the rest of the stories, but as the season goes on, until the end, where it has that sort of cliffhanger for what's going to happen in the next season. It's very well done, and really, in the context of the world, it is the most important aspect of the whole world, because, like I mentioned, I think in the last episode, it is probably the most important war right now, because if that fails, hell will freeze over the entire of Westeros, I feel.
Yes.
Because of the threat of the White Walkers.
Yeah.
And I enjoy Jon's story of going from... He wants to go to the wall, which is an aspect of the story I didn't actually expect to see. But then to go there, be disrespected by practically everybody, especially one of the higher-ups, and then kind of feel like he's entitled to be like a ranger or to be respected.
It's a very similar... It's almost similar to how Joffrey feels, but obviously not as despicable. But there is an entitlement to him, despite the fact that he's a bastard.
And then he... Yeah, like his arc for this season is sort of like the bringing down of him realizing him being at the wall, he is now part of that, and he's a family with them, and he's the same as them. They're all equal because they all see, whether they're criminals or whether they're bastards or whether they're just people that were bandits, they're all the same, because that's the culture of the wall.
Yeah,
being on the Night's Watch, it's very well done, and it's a nice small arc for him. For his character starting off, having him feel so entitled, but then realise that the war was very important to him, and it will be important for him going forward, because it is practically what's going to hold everything back while everything else within the world is going on.
Yeah, I love the way in the first 2 episodes they establish him being a bastard, and that's his defining trait, and that's the one thing that's holding him back, especially with Catelyn as well. And one of my favourite scenes from episode 2 is the one where he says goodbye to Ned, where, you know, Jon's obviously not going to see Ned for a long time, and now he's realised that he's never going to see him again.
Yeah,
and he asks,
never got to talk about.
Yeah, and now that he's transitioning from being a boy into a man, he's decided, you know, I think it's about time I know the truth. And he asks Ned, like, does my mother know who I am and where I am, and is she safe? Does she know I'm safe? And Ned obviously says, the next time we see each other, we'll talk about your mother, I promise. And obviously that's not going to happen now because Ned's dead.
Yeah. I enjoy Jon's arc for this season, and I look forward to seeing where his story goes.
Yeah, I like how they put at the wall, they put the main focus on developing all the characters there before they go beyond. And obviously they had that very small tease where that corpse with blue eyes came into Gior's room, which again teases like things to come. Yeah, but I really like the way Jon fit in with all those different characters, like starting off with his uncle Benjen, you know, one of the only family members that actually really liked him, and then like it's the one person at the wall that he knew, and then Benjen went missing, so Jon was left alone.
It's very much putting him out of his comfort zone, and he's quite a very angry character, I think, at times as well, and I think they do a very good job of getting that across, and then him coming to that realization that we talked about just now, with him being like, I'm now equal to all these people around me. I think it's very well done. But
then of course that anger is then met with his new best friend, that being Samwell Tarly, who again I think is such a great character. I love Samwell Tarly. I think he's so different from everyone else, in the sense that, like Jon, he was also oppressed by his family, not because he was a bastard, but because he was, you know, soft. You know, he was weak and fat and, you know, nice. He was too nice, and his father, obviously being a war general, didn't approve of that, and he sent him to the wall, saying, if you don't take the black, we will let you die. Just very heartbreaking in the sense that, and like, I like how Sam and Jon can connect over the fact that they were both treated badly by their families, but then Sam helps put in perspective what Jon has now at the wall, because Jon obviously wanting to leave, he's like, oh, they're going to make me a steward, you know, I hate these people, they are only jealous because I'm better than them. And then Sam, you know, puts in perspective, you know, there's that scene where he says, I always wanted to be a wizard,
Yeah.
And I just love the way that Sam and John's connection with each other is so strong. And I love John Bradley, the actor who plays Samwell. I feel like he's such a charming person. I love him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like quite he's one of the most like unique characters because he's quite a vulnerable character and is quite like a lovable idiot.
Yeah.
But he's not an idiot.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels to Neville Longbottom actually. In some respects,
I think that's the best parallel.
I mean, not just only because literally in Fire and Blood, like Sam tried to stop John from leaving. But yeah, I love Sam. Sam is one of the very few characters that is just pure good. Like in terms of his heart, he is just a good person. Though I suppose the one thing that makes him a bit flawed is he's a bit of a pervert. Oh dear. Like he's desperate for girls because he's a virgin. He's a fat virgin.
Yeah.
Oh, I like red hair. And we're you know better? Really? But yeah, Sam's great. And I just love, I think the actor really sells the character for me. You know, he's got such a lovable charm about him.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Of course, with that you get the three other Night's Watch characters that John was with, and that being, you get Pip, Gren, and Rast. And Pip and Gren become, like, at first that they hate John, because he's beating them up and he's being arrogant. And then eventually they grow to become his friends. But then, of course, Rast doesn't. Rast, like, diverges and he still hates John. And that you obviously get the scene where John tells Rast in his sleep, like, no one touches Sam, and Ghost is there to threaten him. But yeah, what did you think of those little side characters?
I liked them. I think it's nice to sort of build up characters on the wall, I think, just to make it feel more lived in. And it's good to have those. And they are just pretty, like, well put together little minor characters.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't get that much development at all, but they do have, they have interesting backstories and they work well with John, I feel.
Yeah, they do a good job at putting together.
And I like that. I like that not all of them become his friend. Like Rast just still hates him anyway. Like you get that scene where he's like, I think I'm gonna slice Piggy off with a slicer. I'm gonna slice a bit of bacon off Piggy. You know, I think that scene he said. Yeah. But then of course at the wall we get the three major adult characters. Firstly, being the man-at-arms Alistair Thorne, who is hired to be tough and train these boys into men to fight beyond the wall. But he also hates Jon Snow, and he bullies him. And I think this actor was the perfect casting for this character. That scene in episode 4 where he walks in on them like having a play around, and he puts things in perspective is so brilliant. You know, like, he's like, when you're out there beyond the wall, you know, you don't have your warm fires. You know, I was out there for 6 months. Eating the horses was easy, but then we had to eat each other. Then he goes up to Sam and says, I wish we had some fat pig like you to eat. And then he obviously concludes it off saying, you know, when winter comes, you'll all die like flies.
Yeah.
He's great, Alistair Thorne. Like, he's despicable, but you can understand why Gior has him as a man-at-arms.
Yeah, because he pulls off that fear towards, or giving off fear with him towards everybody at the wall very well. Yeah, he's a very like unlikable character, but in a good way, because he's
the actor has a way of making himself like instantly hateable just with his facial expressions.
And he's doing it to push.
And like the things he says, like Lord Snow. John, well, it's obvious that you're the least useless person around here, bastard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, and I love the bit where John starts like playing around with it, like having them just not fight Sam. And then, Alistair Thorne grabs him with a scruff of the neck and says, "You think this is funny, do you? When you're out there beyond the wall, do you want a man at your back or a snivelling boy?"
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. He's great, Alistair. Of course, we also have Georg Mormont as well, the Lord Commander, who takes John under his wing to be a steward to train him, to become a commander. And gives him Longclaw. He gives him his family sword because obviously his son Jorah in the east has disrespected the family. And I love the fact that Georg sees potential in John. He knows that he wants John to become the next commander, but he's also there to sort of, he's trying to get John to get over all his problems, like to control his anger, to discipline himself, to become a leader, stop being a child. He's basically saying to them, you can't do anything stupid. And obviously you get that scene where after it's found out that Ned was a traitor, Alistair says, "So not only are you a bastard, but you're a traitor's bastard." And John tries to kill him with a knife. And Georg says, "I told you not to do anything stupid." I just like the way that Georg's training John,
Yeah, it's a very nice, like, subtle detail that they put forward, that he's like taking him under his wing in a sense, because like I like how like Sam puts in perspective that he'll be with him like 24 hours doing all this and that. Like he is in the best position at the wall, really, at least in terms of like learning.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting how different he is from his son too.
Yeah, he is,
and it makes sense why they separated, because they're so different. They've grown apart.
Yeah, I think they get that across very well as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I really like the actor who plays him. I think, like, again, visually speaking, he has the visual look of a bear, and obviously that makes sense because Mormont, is part of Bear Island. So I like the fact that they made him look like a bear, but also the fact that he feels like a Northman. He feels like the kind of character that would get along with Ned Stark, and that makes sense why he would favor Jon Snow. He's like another father figure, because you got Ned, and you've also got Benjen, and then also now Mormont as well. I like how you've got these set of very honorable, strong men to lead Jon Snow.
Yeah, I think it's very good. I like how they put that all towards the story. I think it's very good. Yeah. And then of course the other two. Sorry, no, there's two more. Firstly, we have Benjen Stark, who I like the fact that they gave him black hair so that you can immediately identify him and connecting with Jon. Yeah.
And you can tell, like, Benjen has very much looked over Jon his whole childhood. And I love that scene they have on top of the wall where he says, "Better than no one."
Yeah, again, because he just feels quite entitled when he's at the wall early on.
Yeah, and I think the actor who plays Benjen, I think he does a great job at channeling a similar energy to not only Jon, but also Ned as well. They feel like they are all part of the same connection of family.
Yeah, and that's important to get across with family members within a big story like this. So many characters.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other character at the wall is Maester Aemon, who we find out was the rightful heir to the throne at one point and is a Targaryen.
That was one of the most interesting scenes of the season. Like, I was not expecting something like that. I wasn't expecting that. It's a very interesting twist to have this, like, at first quite a, like, on paper, when you first see him, is quite a, like, he's obviously a blind old man who seems quite weak and vulnerable.
Yeah, I think he's the oldest man in the world, actually. He's like 100 and something, like 102 or something ridiculous like that. Which is like, for Westeros, that's a long time to live.
Yeah, especially in a world where there's so many people that die.
But put in perspective, the reason why he may have lived so long may be because he refused the throne.
Possibly, yeah, because he's not put on a pedestal. He's not in the forefront, in like the spotlight, where so many people know of him.
And also, he's a maester, so maesters have very strong health. That's why they are the oldest characters, because they know how to heal themselves.
Yeah, and and maces in this world seem like quite like quiet, or at least are not in the forefront of other people. They're never they're never looked down upon. They're never looked up upon. They're just quite.
Except for one. There is one that does break that, but we'll get to him.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what were you saying?
Yeah, just I like that they detail like with those kind of characters. They're old because of like their position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the world building for that particular like role within the world for all the houses is actually done very well.
It's interesting how like Maester Aemon, a lot of the time when he's talking to people, he's very calm and very like friendly and wise. But then there are those moments of fury, and I like the fact that he channels a bit of that Targaryen fire in him. That's a really nice detail in his acting. Like when the time comes, we all must take arms. Like he does have still some of that fire in him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. It's very good.
And I like the fact that he's got that bit of self-deprecation when he's in that scene with Tyrion, where it's like, this wall is now being contained with sick old men, and we need new breed to come here. Mm-hmm. I like the fact that he's sort of admitting to Tyrion, he's like, I am getting too old for this. You need to have more people come here, otherwise the wall will not be guarded.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's done very well.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the east with Daenerys Targaryen.
A very interesting journey she goes on, from being again, another character that's quite vulnerable, but then she becomes quite a strong character. And I look forward to seeing more of her next season. All the stuff with her I really enjoyed, because it's quite a unique journey she gets. And I liked the story of her trying to gain control and change the Dothraki within as queen. I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed the chemistry she had with a lot of characters around her.
Oh yeah. Well, obviously starting off we have the fact that she's essentially a slave to her brother Viserys. Mm-hmm. And Illyrio as well. And then she's betrothed to Khal Drogo, a Dothraki savage who she's raped by. But then eventually she's through the advising of Jorah Mormont and the education of Doreah, she learns to become equal with him, and then eventually they end up, not only does she become pregnant, but they end up falling in love, which is a very unexpected turn, but it totally works. And I
agree with that. Yeah.
I love the way that then creates this shift of power, because the Dothraki then start to respect her because she is now the wife of their Khal, and then that takes a lot of the power away from Viserys, eventually leading to Viserys' death. And then once she is now in power, she is then attempted to be assassinated by Robert Baratheon, who then regrets it, obviously. But then, obviously, that leads to Khal Drogo basically starting this whole movement of, we will now cross the Narrow Sea and the Dothraki will burn their houses and we will put her on the Iron Throne and my stallion who mounts the world. Then, of course, her trying to liberate the Dothraki culture leads to Khal Drogo dying because Mirri Maz Duur poisons him.
Yeah.
Very interesting story. A lot happens with her. A lot happens, but it's all great.
Yeah, she's definitely one of the characters that get a lot thrown at her throughout the entire season.
Yeah, but then of course,
I think who grows the most.
And then of course the very end, the very last scene, her dragon's hatch. So much happens with Daenerys. She goes on such a massive journey from the first episode to the last.
Yeah. Yeah, I think now her story is going to be quite intriguing going forward, because of how much her world is really changed in this entire season. Mm-hmm. She's lost a lot and gained a lot, and it's very interesting to see how going forward how she'll presumably will continue like what she's been doing, but she's a changed person, so that'll be interesting going forward.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the actress, Emilia Clarke, I have it's my feelings on her are very hard to put into words, because I feel like in other things I've seen her in, her performances haven't been very good, like in Solo, for example.
Yes.
She is quite a melodramatic actress at times, and there are moments here and there where you can see that. Like, I think the scene when she says, "The next time you lay hands on me will be the last time you have hands." Like, she is a little bit on the melodramatic side, but then again, at the same time, the writing for her is so strong that it almost doesn't matter. And like the way that how nuanced her character is, and the way that George R.R. Martin pieced this character together, I almost feel like it's not really an issue here, and I feel like her kind of performance actually fits the character too. Like her sort of more, no, I would say she's a little bit less subtle. Like not like Cersei or Catelyn. She's a bit more of an obvious actress. Like her emotions are very clear. Clear as day, but I feel like for Daenerys being so young, I feel like it almost works. And and also
I can see that.
And also, like, whilst she may not be as strong of an actress, technically speaking, like on a technical level as a lot of the others that are in the show, she definitely has a lot of charisma, and that's one thing I can say about Emilia Clarke. She has a lot of on-screen charisma, and it draws people to her.
As a presence, she is quite like intriguing in terms of her character and performance. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can see those like points. I think like she's definitely like one of the most intriguing storylines in the show because it is quite different from everything else.
Yeah. One thing she does do really well though is the Dothraki language. Like when Emilia Clarke has to speak a foreign language, she's very convincing, I feel.
Yeah.
And she also has, and whilst again, like I made those minor quibbles about her acting, her chemistry with other characters is very strong. Like her chemistry with Viserys, her chemistry with Khal Drogo, and her chemistry with Jorah Mormont is very strong, I feel.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, it's hard for me to quite put into words because it almost sounds like I'm trying to criticize her, but that's not really what I'm saying. What I'm really saying is that I feel the writing for this character is so strong that it doesn't lead her to a bad performance like it does in other things.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think Daenerys was very strong, and I thought his story was very strong and very eventful, but it worked. It was a lovely change of pace. The fact that we've got all this politicking going on in Westeros, to just cross the narrow sea to this other world where there's a completely different story going on, but that story affects what's going on in King's Landing. Sorry, it affects what's going on with Ned and Robert directly. I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's when within the story, whenever we go there, it's a nice change of pace and it's very different. But yeah, it's still impactful within the world.
And whilst I will say that like Daenerys isn't necessarily my favourite character or anything, but she always has one of the best ensembles, I feel. She always has one of the best like ensembles of characters around her, and always has like the best locations, the best looking places, the most interesting, sets and all that, and the costumes and all the...
Aesthetically is very good.
Yeah.
Everything around her.
And in terms of the actual plot around her story, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the build-up for everything around her is very, very good.
Yeah. And yeah, and she definitely has the most memorable look, I feel. Probably not just because of the white hair, but just like I feel like people always remember Daenerys and like the way she looks. She's a character that sticks out straight away. Like she's one that people remember straight away.
Yeah. Everything around it is very memorable because it's quite different to everything else. Everything else, like, it's either quite warm or cold. I would say in terms of aesthetic, that is quite unique whenever we go to that area with her storyline.
Yeah,
It's very memorable stuff.
yeah, it is. Also, because of all the foreign languages as well, the fact we have to click on subtitles for her scenes, like it makes her scenes stick out, but in a good way.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think Daenerys was very strong in season 1. I do think so. And yeah, look, are you looking forward to what's going to happen next now that her Khalasar is quite small?
I just said that. I agree.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, I agree with what you said.
Cool. So let's move on to all the other characters in her circle, and let's start with Viserys Targaryen, played by Harry Lloyd.
Brilliant. He was brilliant. Every episode he was in, he was brilliant. He's he was also one of my favorite characters because mainly due to his acting, because his acting was stellar every time. I
mean, we've already seen him before in Human Nature, Family of Blood as Baines, and he was amazing in that.
Yeah, he is one of the most, whenever everything he is in both in Game of Thrones and Doctor Who, he's definitely one of the most memorable aspects.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
just from his acting.
I mean, acting is his destiny. I mean, he's a great grandchild of Charles Dickens, so it's his destiny to be an actor, and he is great. He is great. Feel the fabric, and he's quite camp as well. He's quite flamboyant. I really like that. I like how how prissy he is, you know.
Yeah.
And that line from episode 1 that really defines him is I would let Khal Drogo and his entire Dothraki horde and his horses fuck you if that meant getting me on the throne. If that's what it took.
It very much sets up his morals, and I think it's done extremely well.
Yeah. And just any scene with him is great. One that sticks out from memory is the bathtub scene with Doreah. That was a really good development scene for Viserys, and I love the detail of not only talking about all the different things about the lore, but also the detail of him being burned by the candle. And that obviously leading to his death in a golden crown.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed all that.
Brilliant death. Crown for a king. It was brutal.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought Viserys was a very strong character to set up Daenerys' story. I love Harry Lloyd's performance. Just great. He's so fun to watch, you know?
He is. For sure he is. He's definitely one of the most, pleasant characters to at least watch from an acting perspective.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I love the detail of him dying right before... him dying in the same episode that Ned realizes that Joffrey's a bastard. And the fact that it then, suddenly eliminates so many usurpers and potential heirs. Yeah,
it's very good to put that all within the same episode. That was those two big plot aspects.
Yeah. But yeah, I love Viserys. Just great. Absolutely great. I feel like Harry Lloyd really, pushed Emilia Clarke's talent to a limit. He really challenged her to do her best, you know? Because he has such a great presence in every scene he's in, and I feel like him being such a refined actor at that point, I feel like he was the perfect character to introduce Daenerys into the story, just to really, push her into that spotlight. And I love that line where he says, "When they say my reign began, sister, they'll say it began today."
Yeah, that's great.
Dothraki horse lords and their sluts. Of course, we also had Ser Jorah Mormont, who I think is another interesting character. Very fascinating.
Yeah, he's one of the most intriguing characters because of what his whole backstory is and current story is. He's one of the most built up characters within the show that isn't a major player but he's still is quite an important, like, has an important role within the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's got like a lot of like history within the world, and like a lot of characters understand like who he is and what he's done.
Yeah, I love the fact that they set it up with a bit of intrigue, like who is this guy and why is he here? And it's a bit weird. It's a bit like he feels so out of place in the East. Then of course it's revealed that he dishonored his father and Ned Stark by selling slaves, but the reason why he sold slaves was because he was desperate for money, and now his wife is with a different man in a different place, which is obviously it's suggested that she's dead. And I really like the fact that he was ordered by Robert Baratheon to kill Daenerys, but then he stops it happening because he falls in love with her. It's so fascinating. He's such a fascinating character, Jorah Mormont. And wow, what a great casting choice, Ian Glenn. Like, Ian Glenn's presence in every scene is felt. You know, I love his voice. I love his stern look. I love the like subtle. Again, we were talking before about Cersei. I feel Jorah Mormont's one of the more subtly acted characters, and just the small details he has.
I would agree with that.
And just I love the way he speaks. Like, he's like, "My Khaleesi." You know, it sounds like the kind of thing you get over a documentary, you know, like almost like David Attenborough, but like a bit more fierce. Yeah. I will not see you burn, Khaleesi. Blood of my blood. But I love the whole storyline of like the mystery behind what the hell's going on with them. And then when he finds out that she's pregnant, he has to ride to Qohor.
Yeah.
And then obviously the episode where it all clicks is You Win or You Die, when they go to the place of the wine cellar.
Yeah, that whole scene was great because it's like quite an important moment for his character in establishing who he is as of right now. I think it's really good.
Yeah. And like, again, we're talking about like small little details that could have changed the entire story. If Jorah Mormont hadn't fallen in love with her, Daenerys would be dead.
Yeah, that absolutely would have happened. So it's interesting how they have like a detail for a character change just so much, just like in a little part of his character would be quite important to the world.
Like, there's so many small decisions that have a massive ripple effect. And I think that's great to have in a story, because that imitates real life. And that sometimes those very small decisions that you make can completely impact the entire history, you know? Going back to the best episode of New Who, The Waters of Mars. Again, talking about small decisions and how they have a massive ripple effect. And like the thing Adelaide said about little people, sometimes little people make all the difference.
Yeah, just like even within a story, just minor characters can be such important figures within a story, and how it just slightly moves in the direction for its narrative.
Yes. We also had Dorea, who was one of her handmaidens, and she taught Daenerys how to make love to Khal Drogo, and she was also in the bathtub scene with Viserys.
Yeah, which were two very good scenes in terms of like developing the characters.
Yeah,
I think both of those scenes were very good.
Yeah, I love
a minor character, but again affects the major characters in a really good way, and moving the plot forward.
I love how she comes from this really different culture, like how she's very intriguing, because she sounds like everything she speaks about is so different from what we understand. No, I just like how she brings something completely different to Daenerys' life. Of course, briefly at the very beginning of the season, in Pentos, we have the character Illyrio Mopatis, who has looked after them since they were children. And for the episodes he appears in, he's very much exposition. But though he did get that very funny line of, "A Dothraki wedding without 3 deaths is considered a dull affair." That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But I think the most interesting scene for Illyrio is when he was in King's Landing with Varys in the Dragon Skull room. That was interesting. The way that it was linked that Illyrio was connected to Varys in the sense that they were whispering across the world, like trying to manipulate events. You know, Illyrio obviously being the one in control of Daenerys' side of things, and then with Varys, he's on the Westeros side of things. And I really liked that little detail that Illyria popped up in King's Landing. That was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I thought it was very good.
Yeah.
Nice little, just subtle detail.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't actually get to see Illyrio again. In the show, he does appear in the book, but unfortunately, they don't have him in the show because he gets cut. Sadly, which is sad. Because there is a storyline that we get much later on with Illyrio that I've read from the books that I quite enjoy, and I kind of wish that we still had him, but we'll get to that when we get to that, when I'll explain why he was cut. But yeah, he was a nice little character, I feel. I liked his look. I like the big red robe, you know?
He almost like seemed quite like, from his clothing, like that typical like religious character, but he was not that because he was quite different from that.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a merchant. And he's also one of the characters in the world that I feel like is in the most safety, and the only threat he has is the Dothraki, and all he has to do is keep them happy and his life is peaceful.
Yeah. I think it's very good stuff.
Of course, then we move on to Khal Drogo, played by Jason Momoa, who at first seems like a very one-dimensional savage, but then he develops into a character, and I think that's great.
Yeah. Never like speaks full English, but is one of like the most intriguing like characters within the season. Like how he develops along with Daenerys and how they like build their bond, I think is actually quite intriguing for the story.
Yeah,
and that like that involves a lot of how Daenerys moves forward. So I think that actually is very well done to have that for her character to have this person share such a bond with, and how that I assume that will like motivate her going forward.
I really like. I think Jason Momoa's physical acting is really good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like the kind of, we were talking before about like the visual acting that him and Emilia Clarke do in their scenes, and they're so good together. Like the way the facial expressions he makes are so good. They always portray perfectly how he's feeling. And I love the way how at the very beginning of the season he is very much a savage, and he's very he's very tribal. But then over the course of the season, I think it's by the time you get to the "you win or you die," he becomes more human, and he's laughing around, and you can see the actual actor Jason Momoa behind it. You can see the smiley, happy-go-lucky Jason, you know. And I like that. I like the way that he manages to humanize Khal Drogo. I think that episode in general is the one where Khal Drogo becomes a full character. And that's the one where he finds out that Robert tried to assassinate his wife and his son. And he has that massive war cry. Of course, that's then immediately succeeded by his death.
Yeah.
But yeah. I thought he was great.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was also really good. I really enjoyed him and his bond with Daenerys.
Yeah, and I think overall the Dothraki culture is a fascinating one.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, it's very tribal and very brutal, and I love the way that to subvert the monarchy, they respect strength. Like, they don't care that Viserys is the rightful heir in Westeros because they have no connection to Westeros at all. They only care about who is the strongest man in the tribe, and Khal Drogo is the strongest. And then once he gets poisoned and becomes weak, they then desert him. I think it's really fascinating how they elect their leader by strength. It's very it's very much like an alpha male, alpha dog, mentality.
Yeah, it's very unique within the world. Yeah, it's very
Absolutely.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. And then of course we have Miri Mazdor, who was the one that poisoned Khal Drogo.
Yeah, little just a very little character within like the last couple episodes of the season that really changed like the whole like how the story moves forward for Daenerys, by it practically removing like a good chunk of the Dothraki for her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like her losing Drogo. Yes, she's like very minor character, but very important for the story.
Yeah, again, like Dorea, very interesting culture. The fact that she's this like healer and witch, and she acted out of revenge and out of her sort of, she came to the basically accepting that her life was ruined, and she had nothing left to live for, and she acted out her revenge on Khal Drogo and Daenerys.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that it wasn't Daenerys that did anything wrong, but Mary Maz-Dor was acting out revenge regardless for what the Dothraki did to her. And that death scene where she gets burned at the stake is brutal. Like when she says, "I'll not scream," and then she starts singing, and then she screams because she's on fire.
Yeah.
Oh, that was horrible. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else want to discuss in the East? I mean, there was a couple of other minor characters like Eirich and Ricaro and Kotho, but they didn't really have that much.
No.
There was
all the characters in that
I think
pretty well discussed.
I think the most notable thing about Eirich was that joke about what Daenerys wants to eat, and then and then they talk about the stallion who mounts the world being her pregnant son, and then she says, "I don't think Khaleesi wants to eat horses." That was so funny.
Yeah.
And then of course Kotha was the one that basically became the new Khal when Drogo fell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So shall we move on from the East?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Robb Stark.
Yeah, he went on a very interesting journey throughout the season, from going from the oldest son, and then sort of becoming a leader, to then becoming King of the North. He went on a very particular journey. Like, he practically, like, very quickly had to really grow up and sort of take responsibility of, like, everything. And it's very interesting, and they build him up very slowly.
Yeah.
And very, like,
It's not until the last few it's not until Ned gets captured that he really kicks into gear.
yeah, because in Winterfell, like, he doesn't really do much when, like, Ned is, like, fine when he's hand the king. It's when he gets in trouble is when Robb really starts to take action, really starts to really become a real character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what they do in the last couple of episodes,
I think in the last 3 episodes, he's one of the best parts of all 3.
Oh, I agree.
And I think Richard Madden is a brilliant actor.
Yeah,
he's so good. And I love the scene in episode 9 where he says, "Victory does not make us conquerors." That whole speech to his people was amazing. And then, of course, the other amazing scene was in episode 10 where he's chopping down the tree and says, "I want to kill them all." And he's in tears. Yeah. That was, so good. So good.
Yeah, that scene is very good.
Yeah. I'm really happy that he got nominated for an Emmy for his role in Bodyguard, because he's a great actor. Unfortunately, he didn't win because of Game of Thrones Season 8. But that's neither here nor there. He should have won. He's great. Fantastic. I actually thought, I mean, before they announced the new 007 character that they're going to do, I actually thought that he might make a really good James Bond, because he's got the right look for it, and he's got the right, like, acting style, I think. Would be interesting.
Yeah.
And also, like, I mean, not as extreme as Nikolai Coster-Waldau, who had to literally speak another language. But Richard Madden is Scottish, so he had to change his accent slightly for this role. Also, I should probably add on top of that Peter Dinklage is American, so he also had to put on an accent as well.
Yeah.
I thought they did great. There are a couple of times though that his accent does slightly slip, and you get in here a little bit of that Scottish. But for the most part, he is a convincing Northerner.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like
Yeah,
I think the scene where his accent slips a little bit is where he goes, "Farewell, snow," and then there's also the one where he's like, "What are you doing here, Lannister?" But yeah, I thought Rob was great. I thought his arc was really interesting. How he sort of bubbled under the surface for a little bit, and then as soon as Ned got captured, he became a main character, and went to war against the Lannisters and actually won a battle somehow. By tactically outsmarting them by attacking Jaime's army with all his men and using 2,000 sacrifices against Tywin. That was great. And
Yeah, it was.
obviously him now being the king in the north, you got to wait for him to see what he's going to do going forward.
Yeah, very good stuff that I'm looking forward to next season with him.
Mm-hmm. God, someone's beating their pillow on the balcony next door. Of course, alongside Robb Stark, we got the character Theon Greyjoy.
Yeah, well, very interesting character he is, because he comes across as quite a desperate and like lonely character because of the backstory they give him.
Mm-hmm.
And the circumstances for him.
Yeah, the fact that in the Greyjoy rebellion they completely and utterly failed, and they captured Theon as a 10-year-old boy, and he became Ned's ward. And I love the detail that he's constantly putting down Jon in the first 2 episodes, because he doesn't want the attention to be put on him. He wants Jon to get all the heat for being an outsider, when I think Theon is more of an outsider than Jon is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. I really enjoyed his little bits he did.
And I love the way that he's very braggadocious, he's very cocky, but then he's constantly it constantly fails. Like every time he tries to be arrogant, all the characters around him humble him. Like Maester Luwin, like Roz, like Tyrion, they all make him realize what a fool he is. But then, of course, you get that very small, subtle arc of him with how he's constantly missing the bullseye on the arrow target, and then eventually he ends up not only hitting a wildling in the back, but then hitting that sparrow from the air, sorry.
Yeah.
But despite all this interesting dig into his character that we get, he still feels like he's in Robb's shadow. And you can tell he's trying to find a way to become himself.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. I think it's very well done. I agree.
But yeah, there's plenty to come with him. We haven't even seen the first inch of what not only this character, but what this actor is capable of. Because this was literally just an introduction for him.
Oh, yeah.
Because Theon's a very fascinating character. There's like Jaime, there's a lot of potential for him, I feel.
I agree.
Then we also have Bran Stark, the boy who climbed and was pushed out the tower.
Yeah, he goes on quite an interesting journey in this season, because he is like we mentioned earlier, his crippling was very much like the beginning of the story. It sets a lot of what happens into motion.
Yes.
And I think what the season does is definitely make you intrigued in what his story is going to be going forward, because they put a lot into the mystical elements for him. Because the whole of his dreams and how that links with everything that's going on. It's very intriguing what they're going to do with him going forward. Yeah,
because of course, right after he falls and he has the coma, then he wakes up. Then it's revealed that he's a cripple and he's got to ride a horse on a saddle. But then he starts having these dreams about the three-eyed raven, and I feel like that's the most intriguing part with Bran.
Yeah, I would probably say so, because they set up quite nicely throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I love the way they link the Three-Eyed Raven with Ned's death. That was great.
Oh, I'd agree.
And one of the characters that we get alongside Bran a lot of the time is Maester Luwin, who's played by Donald Sumpter, who played Rassilon in Hellbent.
Yes. Very, very different performance, and a very good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
this is very much way more suited to him.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was great as like the calm, grandfatherly monk, you know, as Maester Luwin.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But
I very much enjoyed all his scenes for sure.
But he's also not one-dimensional either. He's actually his own person, and I love his like dry sense of humor against Theon. That's great. Like when he's like and failed rebellions, that was hilarious. And then also not only his dry sense of humor, but also that heartbreaking look he has on his face when he reads the Raven note about Ned, and he just says Bran. Amazing.
Yeah, it's just good stuff.
Again, just like one of those very minor characters that adds so much to the story.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then we also have Rickon Stark, who was the youngest brother, who only gets like 3 scenes.
Yeah.
But
very interesting.
Very interesting,
scenes. Yeah, because they put a lot of like interesting like development. There's some very small bits of his character as a child that he's quite self-aware of the events going on around him.
Yeah.
It's very like unique. I think having like a child character have that kind of like thing going on.
And it was interesting the way that they linked the magic between Bran and Rickon, like the fact that they're seeing similar visions.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting for sure. Yeah.
Also, I think Rickon is a good way to show the passage of time that goes on, because in the very first episode he's a very small child.
Oh yeah.
And then by the end you can see he's grown a bit, so it actually shows that some time has passed.
Yeah, quite a lot of time has passed.
Yeah. Then we also have Roderick Cassel, who was the man-at-arms for Winterfell. And he for almost all of the story he was with Catelyn.
Yeah.
And again, like very minor character, but I think he played his role well. And
I agree.
I like how he doesn't care that people make fun of him. Like, you know how Marillion calls him Granddad, and Great John Umber says, "Oh, so you haven't faded away yet?" And he's just like laughing along, like, "Ha ha ha!" You know, he doesn't care. He thinks it's funny.
Yeah,
he gets it. And I just think he makes for a nice character to have. It makes sense why Catelyn would need someone alongside her to protect her from harm.
Yeah.
And I like that detail when they get attacked by the hill tribes, that Roderick is actually overwhelmed by the fight to show that he's getting old. But then when Catelyn tries to tend to his wounds, he says, "Leave me alone, you don't want to get your hands bloody." That was cool. And it shows that he's aging.
Yeah, just a nice little character.
And then, of course, you get his son as well, Jory Cassel, who comes with Ned to King's Landing. And I love that whole little mini story of him having that conversation with Jaime about how they were on the battlefield together and how he nearly had his eye stabbed. And then that Jaime does that to him one episode later. He kills Jory by stabbing him in the eye. Yeah. And also there was also the small detail of him, like, he went to Sir Hugh to get information, and Sir Hugh didn't give a rat's ass about him because he wasn't a knight.
Yeah.
Yeah. "My lord." That's Jory's favourite line. But yeah, nice little character. Didn't get that much to do, but I feel like he added a little bit to the story with Ned, I feel.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And a nice bit of trivia that both actors for Roderick and Jory were in Tooth and Claw at the same time.
Mm.
The Hand of God. And eventually you'll get to play meet the character who's acted by the guy who did The Fist of Man.
Yeah. I know he's in this as well, yeah.
Also in Winterfell, we get to meet Hodor. Hodor. Lovable giant who says one word. And has a very odd scene where he comes to the weirwood tree naked.
Yeah, that was one of the most odd scenes in the season for sure.
I mean, it makes sense for Hodor's character, but it was a bit like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But nothing against Hodor, I think. He's
just sort of there and just sort of like Bran's like helper throughout when he becomes cripple.
Yeah. Hodor. It's just very memorable, you know. Then, of course, we get a couple of scenes with Old Nan who tells stories about the White Walkers. And I love that line from Theon. It's like, if I was stuck in here with this old bat.
Yeah. Very good.
But yeah, I remember you said that those scenes were quite creepy.
Yeah, they were. The way the music amped up and the way the direction was very good at getting that across, because it gets across as like the White Walkers like threat.
Mm.
The legend of them within the world. It was very good world building.
Yes. Then, of course, we get to meet our first set of wildlings, and the one that survives is Osha, who is played by Natalia Tena, who plays Tonks in Harry Potter.
Yes.
And
yeah, interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I think one of the two most interesting things for me about her is firstly the conversation she has with Theon about the gods. Not the gods, about like, and whose lord is that? And if he's lord, then how can you be lord too?
Yeah.
And then of course she has the conversation with Bran about the gods and how beyond the wall there's only the old gods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not, again, a nice little bit of world building, establishing everything around the world, even beyond the wall.
And I like the way she looked. I like how she looked so shaggy and almost looked homeless.
Yeah, in terms of costume, it's very good.
Now, speaking of wildlings, that then brings me back to the pre-title sequence from episode 1. And we have obviously gone through their characters again, but we got Sir Waymar Royce, Will, and then the other character I can't remember the name of. And I think we agree that it was such an interesting way to begin the story with these characters that we would never see again because they all died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good like cold open for sure.
Yeah, and you still haven't met Waymar Royce's father yet, but you will eventually. But yeah, it was an interesting cold open, and I liked the fact that someone who actually saw the White Walkers came down to talk to Ned, and he tried to convince him that they were real, and Ned didn't believe it, and he beheaded him. And like, again, we talk about Ned being the most honourable and most heroic protagonist, but again, going off, subverting that, he beheads an innocent man. I mean, obviously, yes, he broke his vows and fled the wall. He's not supposed to do that. But in the context of us understanding him, us understanding the guy Will who fled, Ned beheaded an innocent man.
Yeah.
So very interesting, and I like how that scene teases the White Walkers.
Yeah, it's very good in that regard.
Yes. Let's move on to Roz again. I know we've already mentioned her, but let's go for our full thoughts. I thought the actress was really good for her. I feel like she actually stole some of the scenes she was in.
Yeah, I thought she was very good.
Yeah. I like how she goes from Winterfell, she's happy at Winterfell being who she is, and then when they all go off to war, she realizes that business is not going to be there for her anymore. And you can tell that Theon has a bit of an attachment to her.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But then obviously she leaves the King's Landing to become part of Littlefinger's brothel, where she learns from him how to make love the southern way. And then we get that very last scene with her and Pycelle in Fire and Blood. I think you can tell on her face that she started to realise that King's Landing wasn't everything that she thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, she's just a nice little character to sort of link up all the stories together with the world. I think it's actually very well done. And
I like the detail in the first episode that when she's with Tyrion, obviously she's playing the character of like being all, they're flirting with each other. And he's like, I hear he's called the Imp. I hear he doesn't like being called that name. And then I like the detail of when Jaime walks in the room, she turns her head and like looks at him because obviously Jaime's very handsome. But then you get that scene with her and Theon as well, and that was great too. I love the bit where Theon's like, "What is it like, having an imp's cock?" And she's like, "Oh, you'd be surprised." And then there's that detail of like, Theon's like, "I don't want to pay for it," and she's like, "Well, get yourself a wife."
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was a nice little character, and the actress really, really brought everything she had to it. I felt.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. All right, let's move on to Sansa Stark.
Yeah, very much in this season, she sort of gets like a real perspective of the world. She very much, at the beginning, is like seeing herself as a princess, and is fallen for like the facade of Joffrey. But as the season goes on, it starts to drop, and then by the end, it's sort of like a broken character. Like her world is just completely fallen apart.
Yeah, she's living in a fairy tale at first, and then eventually that transitions into reality. And by the end, she's completely broken. I think she's a really underrated character because I think people despise her because she's a princess. Like, they don't like her. And I think people don't give her credit because they don't like her. But I think that people need to realize that that's the point, and she is actually a very well-written character. She's meant to come across as a bit despicable because she's, wanting to be spoiled, wanting to be a princess, wanting to marry Prince Joffrey, and she's protecting him despite the fact that he's being horrible. But I think people need to realize that that's the point of her character. She's meant to be like that, And it works because over the course of the season, she goes from being a very childish princess girl to eventually things start to unfold with her. And I think I said in episode 8, the one written by George R. R. Martin, there's a lot more nuance in her character than there was before.
Yeah.
And
I'd say so.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting arc for her. The fact that her dream failed and it ended in the worst possible way. Where her father's dead, her sister's missing, and now she's captured in King's Landing by Cersei and Joffrey.
Yeah. It's the worst situation for her, and her world is practically falling apart around her.
Yeah.
So there was literally nothing she could do either, because she begged for mercy, but because it's Joffrey, none was given.
Yes. And then, of course, you get the other sister, that being Arya Stark.
Yeah.
The tomboy.
She goes the way they foreshadow her story is actually very well done. And the way it builds up, and then how at the beginning she's like the very different start to everybody else, but then by the end is practically nothing. She loses everything, and it's now, as the season ends, it's now heading towards the wall, where everybody goes when they don't have anything else.
I think my favourite aspect of Arya in this season is her scenes, not only with Ned, because obviously the father-daughter chemistry they have is amazing, but it's the scenes with Syrio Forel.
Yeah, those scenes are really good.
I think, again, Syrio Forel is one of those very small characters that's great. I think the actor is amazing. Like, the way he manages to craft this such flamboyant character.
Yeah, he is very good.
Your sword is your arm. You cannot drop your arm. You must. The eyes tell the truth, my voice does not, boy. What do we say to the god of death? Not today. I love him. He only had 3 scenes, and he was amazing.
Yeah, he's very good. I enjoyed him for the little time he was on, because it was very important for Aya's development. Yeah,
and it was nice to get an introduction to a character from Bravos, because that's one of the only places that we don't know much about yet. It's a part of the world we haven't been to yet, and it was really cool to get a little bit of more of that extra culture that's in the world in Bravos with Sirio Farrell. That was cool. Really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Ah. Oh, he's great. But yeah, I really liked Aya, and I think specifically the scene where she goes into the Dragon Skull chamber where Varys and Illyrio are. That was a really well written scene, because obviously she wouldn't understand what's going on, because she goes up to her father and says, I think one of them was fat. She has no idea what they're talking about. That was really cool
stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought, and it's funny because we both have quite bad blood with Maisie Williams from Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But I feel like she is so much more fitting to this.
Yeah, she's way better in like a very dramatic story with very strong writing.
Like where she's playing an actual child, you know?
Yeah.
And she feels a lot more innocent and endearing.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than
a
Shilda.
Here is very good. Yeah.
Like
2 very different characters.
Like Arya, you compare Arya Stark in season 1 to Ashilda, it's like night and day.
Mm-hmm.
Then we move on to Lancel Lannister.
Yeah, quite a small character that has quite major implications towards like a lot of the main characters, especially Robert. Which is very interesting. I think the way they just subtly insert him into the main plot is very intriguing.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's going to have big implications going forward.
Yeah, so the 3 main details are, firstly, the scenes with him and Robert are hilarious, especially in episode 5. Like, the too fat for my armor scene is one of the funniest scenes in the whole show. It has to be. Your mother was a dumb whore with a fat ass. Like, I just love that scene so much. And the way he bullies Lancel, it's hilarious. And he's like, you think that's funny, do you? Oh, you don't think the hands joke's funny, do you?
Yeah.
So good. And then, of course, the other detail that he's the one that poisons Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And it essentially gets the king killed.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the twist in the final episode that he's sleeping with Cersei.
That's I assume going forward into the next season, that's gonna be big for the story. I think.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting to go forward with Cersei, Jaime, and then Joffrey as well. All those how he has moved all those stories forward.
Yes.
With what he's done this season.
Yes. Now let's move on to what I have stated as my favourite character. Though having said that. In this season, he wasn't necessarily the focal point until the very end. That would be Tywin Lannister, played by Charles Dance.
He was great. Didn't have a massive part to play this season because he wasn't the integral part of the main stories, but the scenes he was in were fantastic from an acting perspective, and what they set him up to do for future seasons, I'm very much looking forward to. He's very much going to be a big player, I would assume, next season.
Yeah.
Because he's moving the chess pieces for next season.
Yeah, let's say, basically what I can say about Tywin is the best is yet to come. Because he only just got an introduction here, and like we said, the scenes he's in are amazing. Like that scene with Jaime at the start of episode 7, where he's cutting the stag open. and he says, "That is not an opinion, that is a fact." And then he says, "You need to become the man that you were born to be. Not tomorrow, not next year, now." And then, of course, the scenes he has with Tyrion as well. And just all the backstory we get about Tywin from not only Ned, but also, and Robert, but also Tyrion as well. We learn things about him, about the past, and about how he owns the world. He's the most wealthy man. And I think Charles Dance was absolutely the perfect casting choice. He's phenomenal. He has so much command and presence, and he commands respect. The character absolutely commands respect. And
sure.
like, he is hyped up as the big character, like the big one, the most wealthy man, the most powerful man. And it's like, wow, that's a lot to hype up a character for. And then when you finally see him, he doesn't disappoint at all, because Charles Dance makes you believe he really is that. You absolutely believe that he is the big lion. He is the one that controls the world with his presence, with the way he speaks, with his intelligence, with his war tactics. But then also the bit of humility he has when he realized that Robb outsmarted him as well. I thought that was a really nice detail.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed everything involving him.
Oh, yeah.
In the latter half of this season.
They have my son! And I like the fact that he says that about Jaime, but that when Tyrion's captured, he's more reluctant. He's like, he may be an imp, but he's a Lannister. You know?
Yeah, I agree.
But when his golden child Jaime was captured, it's the end of the world, basically. And I love the detail that Tywin has, that he basically calls Joffrey stupid for killing Ned.
Yeah. Yeah, because he is.
Yeah.
Like we mentioned in the last episode, what that does, like, just from a tactical aspect, it's probably the poorest choice Joffrey could have made.
Yeah. But yeah, of course, going forward with Tywin, he was appointed Hand of the King, and he has chosen to have Tyrion act as Hand of the King in his stead, because he's going to Harrenhal, and we'll have to wait and find out what he's got planned. Because you'd have to imagine you'd have to have something planned quite special if you're not going to be Hand of the King. There's obviously going to be something quite important otherwise that you have to do. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see what Tywin's got planned next season.
Yeah.
So yeah, I assume you're going to look forward to seeing more of him.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Love him. Love Tywin. Unfortunately, I can't say as much enthusiasm about his brother though, Kevin. There's nothing wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with Kevin. He's fine, but he's just a soldier. He's a soldier commander. His son is Lancel, and his brother is Tywin, and that's all there is to him, really.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and that's fine. It's not a problem. It's just that there's not much to say about him, really.
Yeah, for sure.
We get very brief scenes with Joffrey's siblings Tommen and Marcella. The most memorable one being the one at the breakfast table in episode 2. I love the chemistry that Tyrion has with them. Like, it shows that he really loves those children. And then I like the fact that at that table, the kids don't know it, but at that table, it's a mother and a father with their children. Because obviously Jaime's there as well. And I think that scene really illustrates, because Robert's not there. Robert doesn't give two shits about Tommen and Marcella. You know? And I think it really illustrates that Jaime is the true father of these children. Not just literally, because he is literally the father, but he is their caregiver, and that's why he's there at the table with them, acting as their uncle. You know? And then of course their actual uncle Tyrion comes along, and yeah, I like the way that those children were introduced with, you know, using Jaime, Cersei, and Tyrion, and using those characters to aid their story. And because they're kids now, what I can say is that they obviously get more to do later as they get older.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, moving on from then, we have Renly Baratheon.
He goes on like a very small journey himself, from being like quite a minor presence within the story to then sort of becoming his own.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting for him what he does next season, because now he believes like
He should be king.
he should be king, not
Yeah.
Stannis.
Yeah. Because
Joffrey.
Renly's the people's choice.
Because he's the most beloved.
Yeah.
Out of,
If it was if it was like a democratic vote, or sorry, what is it, democracy, whatever it is, fucking, you know what I mean. If it was a vote, the people would vote for him because they want him as king. They love him, you know. And they wouldn't vote for Ned because Ned would get the vote in the North because he's obviously the most respected and the most honorable. But Ned very much follows by the rules. Like he's in some ways he's a little bit conservative, whereas Renly is the young popular politician. You know, he's the shiny toy. Like not only is he a strong leader, but he's also a fresh face. He's also a very popular face. And I think that shows of like, but then again, despite the fact that he is popular, I think it's the scenes with Loras Tyrell, the Knight of the Flowers, that really make him realize who he really is, and it builds an arrogance in him, and you can see Renly start to get a bit arrogant.
Yeah.
And like when he starts to become more vain and realize that he should be king, he becomes very much full of himself. But for understandable reasons. And I just think that whole storyline in episode 5 of introducing Loras Tyrell and that whole scene they had together, obviously revealing that Renly is gay, so he doesn't quite fit in with the world either, in the sense that the world is built off marriage between man and woman, and he's gay. So that again throws another interesting element into Renly's character as well. And I just really like that scene that he and Loras Tyrell have together. It just completely develops their characters so well, not only through their dialogue, but through their like physical, because obviously Loras is shaving him, and he uses the metaphor of cutting the blood, and he's like, you need to get used to looking at this blood, because Renly doesn't like the sight of blood. He's very soft. You know, he's not very tough. And I like that scene where Loras is like, you need to get used to the sight of blood if you want to be king.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice setup for him for next season for
Yes.
sure.
And for Loras Tyrell as well. I think Loras is a really interesting character, like just in the one episode he gets. Like I love the detail that he beats the mountain in a joust.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and he's got the pretty armor, and he's very rich, and it introduces the Tyrell family, and it's revealed that the Tyrells are the second richest after Tywin Lannister.
Yeah.
And basically the reason why is because Tywin has all the gold, but the Tyrells have all the crops, so all the food comes from the Tyrells. So they do have quite a lot of power as well. And eventually, because Ned denies Renly the throne because he believes Stannis is the rightful heir, Renly ends up fleeing to the Reach with Loras Tyrell, which you're going to have to wait and see what happens next with that. But yeah, I thought Renly was a really interesting character, being Robert's younger brother. Like, younger brother. Like, he's way younger than Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And again,
It is, for sure.
Again, going back to, because we were talking before about strong female characters with Cersei and Catelyn, like, this is how you do gay characters as well. Because, like, you know, you get some franchises that force it down your throat. Like, obviously love Series 10, but sometimes how they handled the Bill Potts being gay thing was a bit too heavy-handed, like where they would every episode tell the same joke. Whereas this is how you do it.
The worst it got was later on in the series, When you do it early on, I think it's fine because it's establishing a character. But
Yeah.
when you repeat
It got very
later on,
repetitive,
it's when
didn't it?
becomes a problem.
Yeah, it got very repetitive and just it didn't quite work because it got a bit stale.
Oh yeah.
And it was obvious that they were just trying to make a point. They were trying to be like, hey, look, we have a gay character representation. Whereas here, this is doing it in a much more realistic way. In the sense that Renly is a strong character. I mean, I'm not saying that Bill isn't, because Bill is a strong character too. But Renly is a character in his own. And because of his sexuality, he doesn't fit in to this world.
Yeah. I'd say so.
And I think that's a much cleverer way of approaching it. I think it's a lot more subtle in the sense that you can sympathize or empathize with Renly, depending, because you see the consequences of his sexuality rather than him telling a character that doesn't like him that he is that and he should be accepted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what I mean.
Like it's more so like you sympathize with him because he's keeping it a secret because he has to.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot more realistic, and I mean it's much bleaker, but I think it's a very subtle, compelling story.
It is, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, Loris Tyrell was great too.
Yeah, for sure. Agree.
Then we also had Barristan Selmy.
Yeah, quite unique little small character within the story who they build up quite a lot, and then I'm interested to see what he actually does next.
Yeah, because he was banished. He was banished from the Kingsguard.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting because of how they've established him so far.
Yeah.
What they're actually going to do with him.
Yeah, the interesting story of him being the greatest swordsman in the world, but he still couldn't save Robert. And I think it comes from that line that Ned said about poison being a woman's weapon. In the sense that Barristan can fight off anyone with a sword, but he can't fight off poison. He's not tactical enough to know that that Robert's being poisoned. He only knows how to fight with a sword.
Yeah, pretty much.
But I just love the way they set up Barristan with how much everyone just respects him, except for Cersei, obviously, and Joffrey. But like people like Ned and Robert, they all respect him, and Jaime as well. That was an interesting detail. The fact that they all respect how much talent he has as a swordsman. And I think it's really neat detail that they have both Ned and Jaime praise his sword fighting, as if, like, to say that he is better than them. Yeah. Which is really cool.
I think it was very well done, building up throughout the story.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I love that bit where he gets banished and he says, I could carve through the five of you like a cake. Then, of course,
very good stuff.
Very briefly, we didn't get much from him, but we got the character Janos Slynt, who was the commander of the City Watch. And his main detail was the fact that he turned on Ned in episode 7. Him and Littlefinger conspired to turn on Ned. And that was interesting. But we'll get more on him eventually. But I think it definitely shows that he is a bit of a coward, maybe. In the sense that he's willing to conspire against the hand of the king if someone pays him the right money, or if the person in the right place of power commands him to do so. Yeah,
very good. Just a little bit of a minor character.
Yes, and I also want to make the detail. I love the design of the City Watch armor. It looks really cool, like with the chainmail going across the sides. That was awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Then we obviously got a very brief part with Gendry, the bastard son of Robert Baratheon, and he was part of the Jon Arryn mystery. And he doesn't know that he's Robert's bastard. And then, of course, once Joffrey becomes goes on the throne, he gets sent to the Wall to get away from the Lannisters, and he joins up with Arya. Yeah.
that's going to be interesting what his story goes through in the future, because he's definitely going to be like a very important figure, at least for like the overarching story.
Yeah, I like the scene where Ned finds him and he's saying that's some nice sword. What was it, like craftswork you've done there? And then he snaps that back at him. He's like, "It's not for sale." And I like the fact that he has Robert's like spiky wit. You know, he's got like Robert's, the way that Robert like talks back to people. So he's got that part of his father in him. Yeah, that was cool, I thought. Then, of course, we move to the Eirich with Catelyn's sister Lysa Arryn and her son Robin Arryn. Oof.
Yeah, I think we mentioned how weirdly that was the most uncomfortable we've been in the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that stuff was just like unpleasant to watch.
Yeah.
It was very good.
Yeah.
For Catelyn's character.
I love the detail of the fact that the mystery revolves around the death of this woman's husband, and then Catelyn hasn't seen her in 5 years, and all she remembers is her sister. And then it's like we are told that we basically need to trust this person because it's Catelyn's sister. If we can trust Catelyn, we can trust her sister, right? And then eventually we end up meeting Lysa Arryn, and she's not what we thought she would be.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that all of these just puppets, these Knights of the Vale, just so dedicated to her because she was married to Jon Arryn. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that she's a crazy woman that breastfeeds her old son. Well, he's not that old, but he's too old for breastfeeding. And yeah, I think Robin Arryn is possibly the most like cringe character, and that's a good thing. But boy, he's painful, isn't he? He's so painful.
Oh yeah.
I want to see the bad man fly.
Yeah.
Ugh. And I just love how deranged Lysa Arryn is. And I love how she hides the letter from Catelyn that Ned was captured to protect her family. And then you get that scene where Catelyn snaps at her sister.
Yeah, very good scene that was.
Yeah. But I think the actress for Lysa Arryn does such a good job of playing that crazed woman.
She does. That is for certain, for sure.
Yeah. And I love how Tyrion takes the piss out of her. Yeah, just very unpleasant characters in the best way. At the Eyrie, though, we did meet Maud, who was the prison guard.
Yeah.
And I liked his little arc where Tyrion promised to pay his debts, and he did.
Yeah, because they continue up that Lannisters always pay their debts. It's a nice little way to build up that saying for the Lannisters.
Bad dwarf man. Then we have Yoren, who had a very interesting journey in this, didn't he? Going from the Wall down to Winterfell, then through where Tyrion got captured near the Riverlands, and then reporting down to King's Landing to Ned, and then Yoren telling Ned that being the reason why Ned got into a fight with Jaime. So, like, again, a very small character that makes a big difference. And then obviously him being the one that protects Arya from running onto the stage.
Yeah, very important, because if he didn't do that, I would probably be dead, because it was a very crowded situation.
Yeah. And then of course,
how quite a minor character can be quite important.
And then of course him cutting Arya's hair, and now he's going to bring her and Gendry to the Wall.
Yeah.
With Lomi and Hot Pie, there were two characters that were introduced in the final episode as well. Lomi being the blonde one and Hot Pie being the fat one. I kicked him in the balls. Yeah. And a very brief appearance from Jack and Agar as well.
Yeah.
But I love that little scene at the Wall with Yoren, Benjen, and Tyrion. That was great too.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah. Alright. Moving on. Oh, yes. Oh, I've been waiting for this. Peter Baelish, aka Littlefinger.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
One of the best like characters in the season because of how smart and like manipulative and like how he moves things around for his benefit. It's brilliant.
He manipulated that whole thing.
Yeah. Every scene with him is fantastic, and the scenes with him and Varys are some of the best in the entire season
Oh yeah.
because they're They're like playing a game between each other.
Oh yeah.
They're moving the chess pieces.
Absolutely.
It's brilliant. I absolutely
So
love those two
good.
characters.
So good, and I love how they set up Littlefinger as a man with much greed. Like, he wants to be on the Iron Throne. He wants to be married to Ned's wife. Like, he wants everything. He wants power, and he's using his intelligence to manipulate everyone into getting what he wants.
Yeah, it's good stuff. He's very much
So good.
very much one of the smartest characters.
Yeah.
And they do very well to establish that through all his actions and how he moves around the plot for his favour and how all the twists and turns are brilliant with involved.
Yeah. And Aidan Gillen's acting is so damn subtle. Like, you talk about subtle acting with Cersei, this guy's probably the epitome of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's one of the best I've seen.
Oh, he's so good.
He's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And Varys as well, played by Conleth Hill. Very different in terms of motives. Varys is not determined by greed. He's more so... I think in the chess game, Varys is playing the white pieces and Littlefinger's playing the black pieces. Mm-hmm. And I think very much Varys is trying to benefit what's best for the realm. He wants to, like, in the final couple of episodes, he's trying to benefit what's best for Ned's daughters. He wants there to be peace, he wants there to be prosperity, but he's also at the same time quite devious in doing so. He does the same things that Littlefinger does, but for different reasons. And obviously part of the reason why he's not motivated by greed is because he's a eunuch. He will never marry, he'll never father any children. He probably will never have any love. So his entire motivation comes behind, what he thinks is good for the realm. But on top of that, Varys is such a brilliantly funny character. He's so sarcastic and passive-aggressive. And his dynamic with Littlefinger is off the charts. Their scenes are so good. So good.
Great. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff.
Yeah. And I love... So obviously you get the scene, I believe it's episode 5, where they're basically taunting each other about, like, what if the world knew about your secrets that I know? And it's like, I have seen you very recently, and I'm like, but I believe that I have seen you more recently than you have seen me. Oh, was that you under the bed?
That's great.
And I love the fact that they've got these little birds that are spying everywhere.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. So brilliant. Like, you could just have, like, an entire storyline with just those characters, and it would be great. Yeah. And that final conversation they have in episode 10 about Varys' gash was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff.
And also the interesting detail that Littlefinger owns a brothel as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just...
It's very well done how they established that into the story.
Yep. And obviously in episode 4, him saying mistrusting me was the wisest thing that you did since you came to King's Landing. And then in episode 7, at the cliffhanger, saying to Ned, I told you not to trust me.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as Ned's captured, Littlefinger disappears into the background, not to be seen, to avoid all the chaos. Fucking brilliant.
Yeah, good stuff.
And I love that scene where he's advising Ned not to go forward with it. He's actually telling Ned not to do it, Like, beforehand, he's basically trying to convince him out of it, but Ned obviously is like, nope, Stannis is the fucking king. I'm going to do what I think is honourable, and you can't change my mind.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I
Yeah.
love it.
I just love the way how Littlefinger is the complete antithesis of Ned.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They do a brilliant job at making them like opposites.
Yeah.
And the scenes they have together is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you'll be waiting to look forward to seeing more of Littlefinger and Varys.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. They're some of the best parts of the show.
It is.
They are
It
just
really is.
that perfect cherry on top of the cake, you know?
They have the most memorable scenes out of any episode when they share a scene together.
Mm. The actors are just off the charts.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And then we also have Grand Maester Pycelle, played by Julian Glover, who's another legendary actor who's been in so many things. I love his little arc of him pretending to be an old man, and then it's revealed in the very last episode that he was lying and bullshitting the whole time.
Yeah, that's so well done.
Yeah.
Because it puts that context on everything.
Yeah. And I love the fact that
Great little.
he's kissing Joffrey's ass for power.
Yeah, because he's not a stupid person.
Yeah.
He knows what he needs.
And now, because of that, we know that he was fully aware that the Tears of Lys killed Jon Arryn. He absolutely knew that was the truth. He was just saying to Ned, it's like, well, this book is obviously not any importance. It's a daft old tale. And he's only saying that because he doesn't want Ned to read it.
Yeah.
Because he knows the truth.
think it's really well
Pycelle knows the truth about Joffrey, but he's kissing his ass anyway for power. And that makes him very different from the other maesters like Lewin and Aemon, who are much more kind-hearted.
Yeah.
So Pycelle, in his own respect, is a little bit like Littlefinger and Varys in the sense that he is also a bit devious.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And what a great look too, like with the big white beard and the chains and the big cloak. I like that.
Yeah. It makes it seem like he's always extremely hot.
Yeah. And Julian Glover is amazing. Great actor.
Oh, he's very good.
Yeah. Let's move on. Have we talked about Septim Ordain?
Don't think we have.
Right, so she didn't get that much to do, but I liked her in the context mainly of Sansa's story.
Yeah.
And I liked the detail that despite the fact that Sansa was quite horrible to her, she was still willing to sacrifice her life to save Sansa.
Yeah, it puts Sansa into perspective for her character.
That scene where she's like, do you even have hair under that robe? And she's like, yes, I do. Oh wait, I just remembered. I don't care.
Oh yeah, that was when she was talking about where she lives. She was explaining.
Oh, yeah,
She
yeah.
was like, oh yeah.
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 But yeah, nice little small character.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the funniest lines from Ned was when he said to Septim Ordain, war was easier than daughters.
For sure.
Then we also have Sandor Clegane, aka the Hound, and his brother Gregor Clegane, aka the Mountain.
Very intriguing characters for sure. The Hound is such an interesting character because I picked this up, how he's loyal to the king, whoever is king. I like the detail of when he's fighting in the mountain, and as soon as Robert calls him to stop, he instantly is on his knees.
Yeah, like a dog.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I think that's great character, subtle character details for someone.
And also the fact that he protected Sansa as well. He's looking out for her.
Yeah, that'll be interesting going forward, how that sort of goes forward with the Joffrey storyline with Sansa.
Yeah. And also the story behind his burn on his head, about when they were children. The Mountain, the Hound was using Gregor's toy, and Gregor pushed his head into the fire. And that's why he hates his brother. Yeah. And then of course you get the Mountain as well, who is one of Tywin's hired mercenaries. And I love how him losing to Loras Tyrell in a joust just sends him on this rage.
Oh yeah, that really sets him off. It becomes quite a intriguing part of the story. Yeah, because that's what really, like, in that moment is when things start to like heat up within that episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
And when the mountain ends up going to the Riverlands and burning down heaps of villages and killing people, Ned sends Beric Dondarrion to go and sort it out, who had a one scene in this season, but eventually we will see him again, and played by a different actor. So that was a setup for his character.
Yeah.
Also, with the mountain, before the joust before the Loras one where he lost, he obviously had the one where he demolished Sir Hugh of the Vale. And I love the detail that, like, Sir Hugh of the Vale was a very interesting character in the sense that he was a squire that suddenly became a knight out of nowhere when Jon Arryn died. And I like the fact that he might be one of the only ones that has details about the incident, and then he was killed.
Yeah.
And brutally at that.
Very brutally.
I really liked Sir Hugh and his, like, pompous arrogance. That was hilarious. He's like, "Are you a knight?" "No, my lord." "Well, it just so happens I am." Yeah. But yeah, that really established the mountain as a strong force, and then to have him lose to Loras's tactical technique, that was awesome. And then he beheaded his own horse. That was brutal.
That was.
Yeah. Then, of course, we have Ilan Payne, who was the man who had his tongue cut out at when he was younger, 20 years before, I believe, and Hal made a joke about him. But then he ended up being the one that beheaded Ned.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he also cut out Marillion's tongue. So I suppose we can move on to Marillion now as well, who was the musician. It was quite annoying throughout, though he did early on. Some of his songs were quite funny, like the one he sang about Tyrion and how Tyrion was going to die. That was pretty funny. But then, of course, he ends up going to King's Landing, and Joffrey has his tongue cut out, which just adds on top of Joffrey's cruelness. He's like, "Would you rather keep your fingers or your tongue?" But yeah, now that Marillion's lost his tongue, we'll probably never see him again.
Yeah, good.
Then we had a very brief appearance from Meryn Trant. It was the one who killed Syrio Forel. Basically, he was just established as quite a horrible person. Very much just a hired person to do the king's bidding.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then we had Micah, who was the butcher's boy from episode 2. The innocent boy that was killed.
Yeah. Establishing the whole thing with Joffrey, which was very well done.
Yes. That was heartbreaking. And then we were briefly introduced to Walder Frey, played by David Bradley, who says that if you want to cross my bridge, you're going to have to promise that your son and your daughter will marry my children.
Yeah, and then they did that for nothing because of Ned's passing.
Yeah. So now Rob has to uphold a promise to Walder Frey, and so does Arya.
That's going to be interesting indeed.
Yeah, and Arya has no idea. Arya has no idea about this at all.
She has no clue. Yeah.
But yeah, now Rob has made that promise to marry one of Walder's daughters, and he has to stick by it. But yeah, it's set up that Walder Frey, played by David Bradley, he's a pedophile, and he mates with his own children to make more children, and marries his own children. Yeah. But I think he is quite a funny character in that way too. Like, he's got quite a dark sense of humor. You know, I love the bit where he's like,
he is very dark.
"Out, all of you." You know, great casting. You know, Filch if Filch was in power, if Filch was a pedophile in power.
God, I miss the screaming.
Yeah, and I love how the Freys are set up as just like they call him the late Walder Frey because he never turns up to the battles. Because he's a massive coward, and like all of the Frey people, like all of his soldiers are just useless. Like they're a completely just useless brick of a family, but they have power of that bridge, which means everything in a battle. Yeah, ugh, disgusting. But I love David Bradley; he's a great actor. He just he's so good at playing that just like old bastard. Then we had John Umber, who was the one that had his hand bitten off by Greywind, and then he joined Rob and became a very emphatic, very loud Northman. Soldier for Rob's army. I really do think John Umber really represents the North in its truest form. Like, he's a tough bastard. He's like, he hates, the fact that they have to bow down to King Joffrey. He's like, I spit on that. Rob's my one true king. I thought that was his best scene when he declared Rob king in the North.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, he definitely has that Northern heart in him.
Yeah.
His bite is bloody tough. Have we already talked about the wine cellar?
I'm not sure we have.
Well, basically, I loved the wine cellar scene. That was fantastic. When he almost poisoned Daenerys, and I loved how he was trying to trick her, like the way he was acting, and all the close-ups as well.
Yeah, I thought that scene was very good.
And then of course they like nodded and like smiled, and then he ran off and got whipped at the legs.
Yeah.
Then we had the Hill tribesmen, the ones that tried to capture Tyrion, and then they were convinced by his trinkets, and then they forced him to go into battle.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
Yeah, I believe the main one was called Shagger.
Yes.
And there was the other one with the missing eye, and then there was that woman. God. And you saw Tywin and Kevin just look at them like, who the hell are these people?
Yeah, exactly. Very good.
And I like that Tywin called them wildlings because he's a bit of a racist. Or like maybe not a racist, but like he doesn't care about the low class. Like, he calls them wildlings because they feel like wildlings to him, even though they're not.
Yeah, pretty much.
We've already talked about the three-eyed raven, so all we have left is the direwolves and the dragons.
Yeah, they were. The direwolves or stuff was very interesting. How that was done throughout the whole season, and then obviously the dragons throughout as well as eggs, and then them hatching at the end. Very interesting as well.
Yes.
Very actually good stuff in just slow build for all of those.
Yes. Now,
did that throughout.
There was something I said in the episode 1 trivia that I couldn't say because it was foreshadowing, because it would spoil things. But the scene where they find the direwolves foreshadows the entire season, because they walk and they discover a dead stag, and that's symbolizing Robert's death. And then after that, shortly after that, they find a dead direwolf with its pups. And I think it symbolizes it because not only did Robert die, the dead stag, but also the direwolf died, and that represented Ned. And then the little pups that come out are Ned's children, who then separate. So that one scene, that was actually the first scene that George R.R. Martin wrote for the book. That one scene foreshadows this entire season. I think that's really clever.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Alright. Wow, 2.5 hours talking about just the characters. Holy shit.
Yeah.
But, it's Game of Thrones. There's hundreds of characters. They're so nuanced as well. There's so much to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, now we move on to the categories. So this is the point in the recap where we go through a bunch of different characters and we give what our favourites and least favourites of all sorts of things on them. And for these, I will put polls in the description for you guys to vote what your favourites and least favourites are. And it's always fun to do that. So, the first category we are going to go for is the Standout Character. Have you came up with a choice for this, Callum?
Yes.
And who is it?
Tyrion Lannister.
Cool. And why have you chosen Tyrion Lannister?
Because he is one of the most intriguing characters because of how vulnerable but also how smart he is. And the way they use him within the story, I think, is brilliant. The acting is also stellar. I think he's the best actor in the season.
Awesome.
So, and he's just incredible, and I enjoy his character so much. And like I keep saying, because the most intriguing thing going into season 2 will be him as the Hand of the King.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very looking forward to seeing more of him in that regard in King's Landing. Cause
he's likely to be a popular choice, I think, for this voting.
Yeah, for sure, because he's brilliant.
Yep. Hard to argue with that. I have gone for Ned Stark.
That's a very good.
And it's an easy choice because he's the central character of this story, but I think it really, for me, this is a really special character, and his entire story contained within this one season is so perfectly executed, and Sean Bean's acting is absolutely off the charts. And like I said at the beginning of the review, the way that the story subverts the hero's journey with him is so brilliant, and just love him. Ned Stark, just the best, brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and just all of his interactions with all the characters and the way the plot unravels as he discovers more information is so intriguing, and just the twists and turns that a story takes, and just where we end up at the end, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, so you guys vote in the description who your favorite character is. I'm not sure if the straw poll will allow me to have all the characters, so I will put the maximum amount that the limit lets me, and I will put the ones that I think are the most likely to get votes. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, now we choose our standout location, and the options are Winterfell, King's Landing, Castle Black / The Wall, Pentos, Vias Dothrak, the Eirich, and the Twins.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your choice, Callum?
I went for the Wall. I think the Wall is such a unique place. I love the aesthetic of it. I love the shots of it, all the establishing shots. Mm-hmm. And I think the way the whole story around the location is built up is really good. I actually really like the Wall as a concept and the way it's used within the story. It's also just a brilliant design how they do it as well. Yeah, so my choice would be the Wall.
That was very close to being mine. That's a very close second. I love the Wall, but I have actually gone for the Eirich. And I love it. I love the way it looks, the fact that it's this long bridge of cliffside that you can't access, this big tower, the way it looks on the inside with the massive area with the stairs going up to the throne, and then the moon door, and also with the prisons, the way the prisons angle and they are off the cliffside. The area is such a unique location. It's so otherworldly, and like something it's so different to anything we have on our Earth, and like the Wall as well. The Wall's like that too. But I just find the Eirich, the way it looks, so awesome. It's so grand, and it looks old and ancient.
Yeah.
Yeah, just really cool. I thought the Eirich was really cool. I just love how massive the rooms are as well inside. Yeah, that's my choice. So yeah, go down, vote in the comments. Standout side character. So for this one, the character that you choose, basically they can't be a Stark, a Lannister, a Baratheon, a Targaryen, or a bastard from any of those four families. So for example, you can't pick Jon Snow or Joffrey. You have to pick someone that doesn't come from those families. This one's going to be hard for me to make a poll for. But I'll try my best. I might, again, pick the 20 that I think are most likely to get votes. Or if it's 20 max, I don't know how much the max is. I guess I'll find out. But yes, what was your choice for the standout side character?
I went with Littlefinger.
Snap.
Yeah. Littlefinger, I think, is the best side character in the season for sure.
Yeah.
Because how clever he is, how he moves around the plot for his favour, and the acting is off the charts for him.
Mm-hmm.
The best subtle character acting I've seen
Yeah, I mean there was a few others that came really close because there's a lot of great side characters in this show. Like
him and Varys for
yeah,
me were quite close.
him and Varys, and also I would also say Jorah Mormont as well is a very strong side character for me.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's a couple of others that come to mind, but yeah, I think Littlefinger, and the main reason why is because he was so in the story, like he was so involved in everything that was happening. And I think that's the difference between him and Varys. Is Varys was fantastic, he was brilliant, but I don't think Varys is quite involved in the story as much as Littlefinger was. And yeah, it's not only is he our favorite side character, but he's one of the best characters overall.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, perfect. I love Littlefinger. He's amazing. Then we move on to the standout music track. We listened to 20 tracks this season, and my Raymond Javadi's music. Sorry, Raymond Javadi. Got to remember that name. Raymond Javadi's music is phenomenal, and every track we listened to, we gave a positive response to, right?
Yeah.
So the options we have are North of the Wall, The King's Arrival, Goodbye Brother, The King's Road, The Wall, A Bird Without Feathers, A Raven from King's Landing, Tobias Doth Rack, Small Pack of Wolves, Await the King's Justice, You'll Be Queen One Day, A Golden Crown, You Win or You Die, Love in the Eyes, The Pointy End, Black of Hair, Victory Does Not Make Us Conquerors, The Assassin's Dagger, When the Sun Rises in the West, and Finale.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So, have you decided your choice?
Yes. The track that I went for was Small Pack of Wolves.
Ah, yes.
I loved that track. The music for the fight between Ned and Jaime, I thought that was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, I think the second one that I would have chosen was the Victory Doesn't. I can't remember what it was called.
Oh, Victory Does Not Make Us Conquerors, the one that plays when Rob's making that speech.
That also was quite close because I think that one was also a beautiful score of emotion for that scene. But yeah, but number one, I picked Small Pack of Wolves. I loved that music for that scene. I thought it was brilliant.
Mm-hmm. It was. This is probably the hardest one for me to choose because there's so many good ones. Those ones that you've mentioned were great. The King's Arrival was a banger, like Robert Baratheon's theme. That was awesome. You also had Tobias Doth Rack as well, the Dothraki theme. That was amazing. There was so much good music. But the one that I've gone for is kind of the easy choice. I've gone for Goodbye Brother, which is the Stark theme. It plays multiple times out throughout the season, and I think it's just such a beautiful song for this family. The whole melody of duh, 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 like it just fully sums up that entire family.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's not only a beautiful song, but it's a heartbreaking song too. It's very sad.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's my choice. But yeah, all overall, the music in Game of Thrones is just outstanding. It's some of the best TV score I've ever heard.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Now, the standout worst thing from Season 1. Now, like with the Doctor Who recaps, I've written down what people usually say is the worst thing, rather than necessarily what I think. That's so we can get a big variety of options. Yeah. So I've gone with what people tend to criticize about it. So there are 10 things that I've written down here. So the first one is the low budget, especially compared to the other seasons. The lack of a battle scene, and not necessarily because we've had fights, but there wasn't a big battle in episode 9. Overcomplication. Some people feel the story overcomplicates itself. Slow pace. It's also a very slow pace show at times. Alienating vocabulary. So there's a lot of words that are used that people don't understand, like maester and Godswood, and just there's a whole bunch of language that people have to learn that they find a bit upsetting. Sometimes you need to really either look it up or have it explained to you what everything means, because it can be a bit confusing if you don't if you're not aware of a lot of the language that was used in not only folklore but like Shakespearean times as well. So like sometimes the vocabulary can be very advanced for some people, which is understandable. Confusing plot. Some people find the plot quite confusing because it's so rich and so heavy, and it has so much going on. And sometimes people find things hard to remember. Or if something is told subtly, they find it difficult to pick up on. Child acting. Some people criticize some of the child acting. Some tonal shifts, like we mentioned with the Hodor scene. That was a bit of a weird tonal shift. Sex position. This is probably the biggest one that critics go against. They don't like how they use sex scenes to create exposition in a story. But I think in the reviews we tended to sort of debunk them. And then number 10 is changes from the book. So some of the really, really hardcore fans that read the books don't like how they made some changes. Like, for example, in Fire and Blood, instead of having this High Septon read out the religious lines, they had Grandmaster Pycelle do it, which doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah.
So yeah. Have you and if you got anything else you wanted to suggest on top of that, you can?
No, I didn't have anyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is your choice?
My choice was that I picked child acting not up to par, because the reason why I said up to par, because I think the child acting was fine, but when you just look at all the adults acting, there is obviously a clear difference. Because I don't think the child acting is terrible, but in comparison, it can be quite, just slightly a bit jarring for some characters. But for example, Joffrey is a child actor, but is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Like on par with some of the actors of adults. Just some child acting is not up to par, but it's very minor.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't overhaul the story. And if I had to pick a worst aspect of the season, that was what I would pick, because everything else I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, and you know, child acting is just, it is what it is. It's very difficult to control. Like, they are only so young, so it's not like we blame them, to be honest. Very, very rare to get child actors that can pull off what someone like Jack Leeson does. But it's a valid criticism. My choice is weird because it's not a criticism I have of the story, because I love the story. But I've gone for overcomplication, and not that I think that it's bad that it's complicated, because I think that's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing that the story is complicated, right? It is fantastic, and for someone like me, this is the kind of story that I like. Having said that, though, I think that for a lot of people, it's very difficult to access this story because it's so rich right out of the gate. A lot of people feel they can't really understand what's going on, and it requires a lot of concentration and a lot of paying attention and a lot of knowledge of certain things to understand the story in its full extent. It's taken me like multiple viewings to fully understand the subtext of the story. And again, this is difficult because it's not really a criticism I have at all. I like that it's complicated. I like that it's full of this subtext. But really, it's the only thing I can really come to think of that when I first watched the show, it slightly turned me off because I didn't quite understand what was happening. But I think, interestingly, the worst thing about the series, basically what I'm trying to say is, and this may sound a bit pompous, I think the worst thing about the series is the fact that most people won't get it straight away. It's more so the people viewing it rather than what's wrong with the story. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with the actual story. It's more so just the fact that there are a lot of people that will be overwhelmed and won't understand it.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that casual fans are the worst thing about Game of Thrones. So, yeah. Bit of an unexpected choice, but I mean, when you've got something as brilliant as this that's so lacking in flaws, it's the only thing I can really think of. You know, I've got to think outside the box. Standout thumbnail, we can't choose yet because we haven't done all the thumbnails. But vote in the polls what you thought the standout thumbnail was. We might come back to it at some point and say what we thought it was. So yeah, those are all the different little categories we've done. So now it is on to the big meaty part that you've all been waiting for, and that is the episode ranking.
Here we go.
So how this is going to work is we are going to rank the episodes of season 1 each, from 10 to 1, and it's going to work the same way we do it with the Doctor Who videos, in the sense that Callum's going to go first with his number 10, then I do my number 10, and then he does his number 9, I do my number 9, and then we work our way all the way up to number 1. And in that, if we snap and we have 2 at the same level, we will snap and talk about it together. But basically what this will do is this will give us a final chance to rank the episodes and how we feel about them, and also give our final thoughts on them if we have any left over that we didn't express in the reviews. So, Callum, are we ready to rank these episodes?
Yes.
So, you begin with your number 10.
My number 10 is Lord Snow.
Snap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lord Snow. It's funny how this is number 10, yet this episode is still really good.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it?
That shows how good this season was. Like, Lord Snow is like, it's quite, out of all the episodes, I would say it's like the most, like, not a lot majorly happens, but a good amount of stuff happens here.
It's all
There's
world
a lot of
building.
good stuff.
The entire thing, I mean, there's a couple of little details with the plot in terms of the knife, like with Catelyn and Ned and Littlefinger, like that's all part of the plot. But apart from that one small thing, the entire episode is world building and character building.
Yeah, because it's when they arrive at King's Landing for the first time. So what it does is try to continue its world building off of the first 2 episodes, and it does it really well.
Yeah,
it's a really good episode.
Yeah,
it's just out of everything else, it's probably the most minor.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to the fact that this is the episode where you're going to have the least attachment, because it's the one with the most strangers, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all the characters that get introduced in the 3rd episode are all strangers to you at that point, so you're a bit like, I don't know who these people are. And it takes time to build them into your investment. So I think it's a good thing that this is last place. Yeah. Because it's the one that should be.
I gave this episode an 8.
So did I.
And it's bottom.
Yeah.
It's still extremely good.
Yeah. If there's one other little criticism I have, is the structuring maybe isn't a little bit as smooth as some of the others. Like, it's
I'd say so.
I think some of the cuts are a bit sharp, and it was a little bit brittle. Like, it was a little bit like the scenes didn't really mesh together as naturally as some of the other episodes. But minor criticism. Absolutely minor criticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say so.
And it did its job in setting up what was to come. And it's still a really good episode, despite being last place. Yeah. Okay, what's your number 9?
Number 9, I have The King's Road.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I think when I put this quite low because it was a very, very good episode. I think it just did a very good job of putting everybody in their directions for the narratives of the season, coming off the opening episode. And again, I think it's the same situation that I think it's a great episode, just there are other episodes in this season that I loved more and they had more impact on the story for me. But again, King's Road is still a very good episode. It continues that world building, it continues to establish all the characters we learned about in the first episode, and it does it extremely well. It's well paced, well acted. It's just a really, really good episode, putting everybody in their starting positions, I guess, for the season. It does it extremely well.
Yes.
And yeah, number 9 I would say is The King's Road for me, which is still a very good episode.
My number 9 is The Pointy End. And the reason why is it's interesting because this is the one written by George R. R. Martin, the one written by the man who wrote the books. So it's interesting that it's this low, but I have my reasons. Firstly, it's great. It is great. It's a great episode. I gave it a 9 out of 10. It's phenomenal. I think it's a brilliant come down after 7 and a brilliant setup for 9. It's a great transition episode. The dialogue and the nuance and the characters is very strong because of George R. R. Martin, obviously. Having said that, as compared to some of the others, it's not as important. It is a transition episode in its function, and a great one at that. And I think, for me, one of the strongest aspects of that, firstly, the scene where Sirio's killed, but also mainly Robb Stark. I think Robb Stark really comes into his own in this one.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why I've put it this low is for those nitpicky scenes. Firstly, the slightly wonky performance with Great John Umber's first scene, where he gets his hand bitten off, and also that weird tonal shift with Hodor. I think it's very minor, but if I'm going to separate the episodes and criticize them and rank them in a list, I'm going to have to look at all the details and find a way to separate them. And I've decided to put the pointy end this low for that reason. But it's still a great episode. And I love the fact that they gave George R. R. Martin an episode, the fact that he wrote the books and now is writing for the TV show as well. And yeah, like I said, it's great. It's just minor little nitpicks, put it slightly below, and it's also a transition episode, so that's why it's my number 9. What's your number 8?
My number 8 is Cripples, Bastards and Broken Things.
Snap.
Yeah. I think this was a very good episode coming off Lord Snow to finally, I think, start to get everything put into motion. All the stories we were heading towards. I think this episode did a really good job at starting to build momentum towards everything. I think it was a very good introduction for characters like Sam. And I think the continuing investigation for Ned, I thought was really good at starting to get his story moving. And I think it did a good job at that.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Very good episode.
I agree. It's great. It's a great way to get the ball rolling. And I think we discussed the strongest parts of it were firstly the East with Viserys and Doreah, the bathtub scene. That was fantastic. And also, but I think my favourite part of the whole episode, my favourite storyline was the Wall. Building up those characters at the Wall you get with Jon and Samwell, and them bonding over them, you know, talking about Ros, and then of course we get that amazing scene with Alliser Thorne where he talks about being beyond the Wall, and I just think it greatly sets up that whole storyline to come. And yeah, Cripples, Bastards and Broken Things really brings the story forward, brings the it's also the episode where Ned starts investigating about Jon Arryn and all that, and that's great. And it's also at the very end the cliffhanger with Catelyn capturing Tyrion. It was, yeah, fantastic. Great episode.
Yeah.
What's your number 7?
My number 7 is The Pointy End.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. Like you said, it's a very good transitional episode from the very, very, very good You Win or You Die and before Baelor. It's the perfect, I'd say, transitional episode between two very big episodes. Because it starts off right after all the stuff that happens in You Win or You Die, and does a really good job of getting everybody ready for like the massive plot developments that will happen next. So I would say for a transitional episode, it's brilliant. It's one of the best transitional episodes I've ever seen in TV.
Yeah,
it's still very good.
Yeah, the only thing was those two little nitpicky bits that we pointed out in the reaction.
Yeah, the tonal shifts were not very good, and it really took me out of it, which was a shame. But other than that, it was still a very good episode.
Yeah, and of course, nice to see the author get an episode too.
Yeah, and
yes.
I thought what he did was pretty good.
Yes. My number 7 is Fire and Blood. Great finale, and the reason why is it's so unique in the sense that Baelor was the hit, but this was the aftermath, and it showed the reactions of all the Starks to Ned's death, and it was heartbreaking. This was possibly the most emotionally charged episode, I think.
I agree.
And it really got me. And I love the way it does that, how it's all a reaction to the events of Baelor, but then it starts to set up what's to come in Season 2, and I think it does a really good job. And like the pointy end, it's somewhat a transitional episode, but rather than transitioning between two episodes, it's transitioning between two seasons, and I think that it does that brilliantly.
It gets everybody in their positions for season 2.
Yeah.
Brilliantly.
Yeah. And also the Birth of the Dragons was great. And Joffrey was a little shit. Yeah. So, great episode. Your number 6.
My number 6 is Winter is Coming.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, the first episode of the season and of the show, I thought it was a brilliant introduction for the whole thing. Can't think of many brilliant first episodes to a show, because what it does such a good job at establishing everybody, who they are, what everything is. It was just brilliant from start to finish. The cold open, everything, all the characters, the ending was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. I think it was a fantastic first episode. Just brilliant stuff.
Really hooking, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And of course we commented on like how we found a way to talk about that opening cold open for half an hour on Patreon. That just really established how rich this show really is. My number 6 is The King's Road. And the reason why is I feel on rewatch, this is the one that's gotten better and better and better. Because not only is it such a brilliant self-contained story that foreshadows what's to come, but it's so good for just like that small group of characters that we first met in the first episode, and just all of the conversations with Ned and Robert, and just all of the foreshadowing, all of the setup. It's just, once you've seen the story of Game of Thrones and you revisit the episode, you realize how many dots are connected to this. And I get so much out of this episode rewatching it, so much more than I did the first time round. But on top of that, I just think it's a brilliant little self-contained story of a small scale of war, with Joffrey, Arya, Sansa, and the Direwolves, and with Robert and Ned and Cersei and Joffrey there, and just great stuff. Yeah, overall, just a great episode for me.
Yeah, I agree.
So, your number 5.
My number 5 is Fire and Blood.
Ah, yes.
A very good finale. Like you said, saying it's a great transitional episode between seasons. I agree. I think it's brilliant in how it sets everybody up from the aftermath to how everything's going to go next season. It puts everybody in positions and it does it brilliantly. So many great things in this episode, and I absolutely think it's a great finale. A great way to come off Baelor, which was fantastic. Just a nice aftermath of the events of Ned's death. Just brilliant stuff. Just absolutely brilliant. Love the finale.
It was awesome, yeah. My number 5 is Winter is Coming. That first episode is such a hook. It gets everything right. All the characters, all the locations, all the families, all the storylines. Flawless. I love it. It's hooking, it's interesting, it's intriguing, it's so complex. And like The King's Road, again, rewatching it, so much subtext. Yeah, it's such a tight hour of TV. And everything is so on par. It's also got the unique factor of some of the scenes were shot on film, so it looks beautiful. It's a very, very gorgeous episode. And literally the only nitpick I have of it is the continuity, because obviously they shot 2 pilots and they don't match. But apart from that, flawless. Absolutely flawless. One of the best first episodes I've ever seen to any TV show. Your number 4.
My number 4 is A Golden Crown.
Snap.
Yeah. Golden Crown is... This is the episode where I think things start to really, like, properly take shape in, like, the twists and the turns. With many impactful moments in this episode. Just brilliant writing and brilliant acting, and the ending of that episode was fantastic.
A crown for a king.
Yeah, that whole scene is just brilliant, and how that changes everything of the show established at that point.
Yeah.
But it does it in a satisfying way.
Yeah. And then, of course, you've got Tyrion's trial at the Eyrie as well.
That was great too.
So good. This is also
fantastic.
And this is also the episode where Ned finds out about Joffrey's birth. And Ned finds out that Joffrey's not the son of King Robert.
Yeah, brilliant stuff.
So
Absolutely
good.
great episode.
So good, so good. I agree. Brilliant episode. I've always loved it. I think when I first watched the show, this was the one where I started to really fall in love with the show. It was just, it's just amazing. It's amazing stuff. And yeah, I just love it. I love the aftermath to episode 5 and how like Robert brings Ned back to being Hand of the King again, and then Robert goes on his hunt. It's just, it's just so brilliant. It's so fucking good. It's still only number 4. So, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is The Wolf and the Lion.
Snap.
Yeah, this was the episode where I got properly hooked. Because this was the episode where everything started to really click for me.
This was the one where King's Landing took the bull by the horns.
Oh yeah,
because they completely cut out the Wall and the East and focused purely on the Starks and the Lannisters only.
Yeah. This is where it made the King's Landing storyline the best in the show so far. It properly focused on it, and that ending was fantastic. It contains my favourite track from the series, from the season, with probably one of my favourite scenes for the entire season.
Yeah.
That fight between Ned and Jaime was fantastic. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Everything about it was brilliant, and I absolutely loved that episode.
Yeah, and not only brilliant, The Wolf and the Lion obviously being Ned and Jaime, and that was awesome. But like I said, the show stealer was Robert Baratheon. That was his episode. Going from the bumbling drunk king, fooling around with Lancel too fat for his armor, then commanding the joust to stop as the angry, fiery king, to then falling out with Ned over Daenerys and banishing him his hand, having that fight, to then one of my favourite scenes in the whole show between Robert and Cersei. It was phenomenal. Robert Baratheon was phenomenal in that episode.
Yeah, that was his episode for sure.
Yeah. Despite being called The Wolf and the Lion, that was his episode.
For sure. 100%.
Yeah. Your number 2.
My number 2 is You Win or You Die.
Snap.
This was the biggest episode of the season so far at that point. It was the moment everything changed. The moment where King's Landing was a dangerous place, where everything was coming together. Just absolutely brilliant. How that episode completely changed everything about King's Landing.
The introduction of Tywin Lannister after the death of Viserys. The scene with Cersei and Ned, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die, there's no middle ground.
Yeah, brilliant.
Littlefinger manipulating everything. Robert Baratheon's death. Then you've got Jon Snow and Sam pledging their vows to join the Night's Watch. Then you've got the wine cellar scene where Daenerys is about to be assassinated and Khal Drogo goes on that rampage. Jason Momoa's best scene in the whole show. It was amazing. And then, of course, the climax with Joffrey on the throne and Ned captured, betrayed, and deserted by Renly for honouring Stannis, and then betrayed by Littlefinger and captured by the Lannisters. Fucking phenomenal TV. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It was. We were on the edge of our seat from start to finish.
Yeah, that final scene was. That was something for sure.
Yeah. One of the most eventful episodes, and the fact that all the storylines linked together as well was amazing. Oh, so good. So fucking good. And that means that our number 1 is the same. So, what is it? 3, 2, 1, Baelor.
Baelor. Best episode of the season by far. Start to finish. Just tension at its highest. Just absolutely brilliant stuff.
Yep.
The ending was beyond what I thought it could be. It was absolutely phenomenal writing, phenomenal television, music, direction, acting, just how it changes everything, how it subverts your expectation in the best way possible, with it being properly built up in the best way possible. Just phenomenal television.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Khal Drogo falling sick. You've got Rob going to war with Jaime and Tywin. That was amazing. You've got and then obviously the big story being King's Landing with Ned and with Joffrey on the throne.
Yep.
It was absolutely outstanding. And also Tyrion as well, with Tyrion's story about Tysha, learning his backstory, meeting Shay and having Bronn there, and then going into battle. And that scene with Robb Stark where he says, "Victory does not make us conquerors." Fucking amazing. And the beheading of Ned Stark, the first major plot twist in the story.
Yeah.
Gut-wrenching, emotional. Well, like, we were in silence for a while after that. It just took our breaths away. Yeah. Baelor is a masterpiece of an episode. I absolutely love it. Absolutely adore it. Yeah, so good. So, go in the description for the polls and vote for what your favorite episode was. In terms of the story arc, what do we think? I mean, the main story arc really was Jon Arryn, wasn't it?
Yeah, and his death, and how Ned was trying to find out what had happened, which ended up being his demise. Yeah.
I love the way that the story arc begins. It seems simple at the beginning, and then as the story progresses, it gets more and more complex, and more layers get added on top of it. And then
for sure.
And then it just ends in absolute chaos.
Yeah, the tension just rises so naturally but brilliantly.
Yeah,
it's great. It's
yeah,
just a brilliant story arc for Ned.
Yeah,
for the Lannisters, for all the Starks.
Yeah. I mean, George R. R. Martin just perfectly crafted this novel together, didn't he?
Yeah.
Absolutely perfectly crafted everything together. So complex, but so brilliant. So, give your conclusion and rating overall for Season 1 of Game of Thrones.
Season 1 is a fantastic introduction to the Game of Thrones world. Every storyline gets a great amount of effort of writing put into it. Everything is satisfying. Everything is so well built up, and all their conclusions and how it sets up the future seasons is done brilliantly. Every episode is of good quality, and some episodes are brilliantly written, and then there are like 1 or 2 or 3 episodes that are just beyond what I thought the show could ever actually do. It's just brilliant stuff. I'm going to give Season 1 a 9.25 out of 10. It is brilliant stuff from start to finish. Every episode is brilliant, and there is some of the best acting I've seen in anything. It is fantastic stuff, and I cannot wait for Season 2. I cannot wait to see where the story goes from now, because so much has changed now from how they've built it up, and it's brilliant, and I cannot wait for Season 2.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Season 1 is absolutely phenomenal. Its writing is impeccable. It has some of the best acting ever. It has some of the best direction, some of the best music. The thread of the plot is amazing. The way they build up all these characters. Like, all these characters that we spent like 2.5 hours talking about. So many of them. They got so many nuances, so many character traits in their relationships, and the way that how this story is so well crafted together, and the stakes are so high because you can believe it. You can believe it. You can believe the tension because it's all so well written. This is a masterpiece of work. An absolute masterpiece of work. And I'm going to give Season 1 a 9.5 out of 10. It is one of the best first seasons I've ever seen for a TV show. And it's based off probably one of the best novels ever written. So, bravo. Absolutely great. Fantastic season it was. And like you, it's going to be great to get into season 2, isn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes. What would you like to see from season 2?
More. Just want more. Just want more stuff. I can't wait for the Lannister storylines to develop. I can't wait to see what the Starks do. I can't see more about Beyond the Wall. I can't wait to see more about Daenerys' story with the dragons. Just everything that's been built up, I cannot wait to see more of.
Excellent.
It's just, I'm loving it so far.
Yeah, so good, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think now having seen this first season, you can understand like why people were so disappointed by season 8 and how far it fell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like, has there ever been a bigger downward spiral for a TV show than that?
Well, for a TV show, probably not.
Yeah. Well, with all that said, with season 1 all wrapped up and done, next time we'll be beginning season 2 with The North Remembers. And that was 3.5 hours down, so we will see you all next time.